Welcome back, everybody. The SBL continues now with probably the biggest set of the week. It's the Bolts up against the Tartarus Titans, and Agro and Mifflin are here to bring you through it. But first, of course, we got to remind you to head on over to needforseats.com and pick yourself up that beautiful SMITE Maxonomic chair. We got them sitting right over here, and that's what I was sitting in during the last cast, and I was particularly comfortable. Mifflin has sold so many chairs.
Is that
as
true?
you just heard. Well, you said we are going to sell so many chairs.
Yeah, but nobody's like come back to me and like told me that we did.
So you
Unless
lied?
you're doing that right now. Well, I projected multiple chair sales.
Okay.
But you know, projections aren't everything.
All right, if in chat that commercial convinced you to buy a Maxonomic chair, DM Mifflin so that he'll feel better about himself.
What's my Twitter?
At Mifflin TV.
That's right. He had to pretend he didn't know. He knew.
I pretended I didn't know, and well, here we are. At Mifflin TV. That's where you can DM him. All right, let's get into with something that's more important than Mifflin. Literally anything, but in particular, this matchup between the Tartarus Titans up against the Olympus Bolts, because Miff, big seeding implications here. The Titans can guarantee themselves a top 2 spot, make sure that they have control of their own destiny somewhat in selecting these groups. But the Bolts, all they need to do is win.
All they need that, and it's not just that the Bolts need to win. They've got multiple teams rooting for the Bolts. The Camelot Kings in particular are really hoping that the Bolts can find a win up against the Tartarus Titans. That would improve their seeding as well. But both of these squads incredibly strong. But one more so a little bit more recently. The Titans have been looking real good.
Yeah, definitely a lot different looks from the Titans. I mean, the set ADC for Cyclone Spin has been a huge thing for them. This Cthulhu for Benji. Feels like a lot of teams are starting to kind of follow that trend of maybe Assassins over there. Cthulhu in the Soul Lane seems to have the next rise. The question is, are they setting the meta a little bit too early before the group stage? You know, now everyone's starting to prepare for what the Titans are doing right now.
Yeah, that is a concern, right? When you have a composition like the Titans do, and when I say that, I mean Cthulhu plus the Morgan or Aphrodite plus Cthulhu. Cthulhu in general really is something that the Titans have brought to the forefront recently, that it does allow all these other teams a little bit more time to kind of figure out what they want to do exactly up against a composition like that, or whether or not it's worth letting some of these pieces through. So I think you bring up a great point in that. They probably could have just held on to this till Worlds, like
well,
legitimately.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. But, of course, getting one of those top seeds and making sure you have your best possible odds to get through the group, always going to be helpful. And you mentioned it, a couple of different looking picks for Paul in the mid lane, going towards things like the Morrigan and like Aphrodite. These are not picks that he's, you know, never played before, but adding a bit of a different wrinkle into what the Tartarus Titans are currently doing.
Yeah, Paul has been a major factor in every single one of these games, man. I mean, this Aphrodite, incredibly annoying. In particular, he's been making a play very consistently around these red buff invades, and red buff invades are not something that we would consider synonymous with Aphrodite, as she is generally lacking pressure in the early game, but he likes to connect up with a high-pressure jungler, things like the Camazotz or the Erlang Shen, and then kind of hide behind that red wall and just use back off as a confirmation on the buff or to help finish off some of Layers' kills, and that keeps him both incredibly safe. It keeps Layers safe because you've got the Undying Love through the wall, that healing, as well as that additional damage and slow from back off. It's a very versatile strategy, and really, I'm not sure how you address that besides ignoring Layers, letting your red buff go, and trying your hardest to dive an Afro, which in its own right is not very easy.
Well, as Mifflin was just saying, a big part of the Tartarus Titans' recent success has been Paul, their mid laner. He's standing by with Dolson right now for a pregame interview.
That's right. Paul is with me, and Paul, you have been at the forefront of the conversation as an entire team. A lot of your compositions have been emulated by other teams here as of late. Cthulhu specifically for Benji, but also pairing that with a couple of your mid lane picks. The Aphrodite, the Morrigan have kind of been pivotal to those compositions.
Yeah.
From your perspective, are you enjoying the meta for you and your team kind of shifting back to the Aphrodite, shifting back to the Morgan?
To be completely honest, I don't really like playing these characters. Like, I want to play gods like Hebo and
Really?
like and Hell and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. Just these maces are so strong, man.
Yeah.
So these assassins just running around killing everyone. So I just got to play something more defensive, pretty much.
Got it. Aphrodite definitely helps you in that conversation. A big matchup here today up against the Olympus Bolts. First and only time playing them here this phase. We've talked a lot on the desk and in the waiting room about the implications of these matchups for you and the rest of your team. Very clear. If you win, you're guaranteed in the top 2.
Yeah.
From a player perspective, how important is that to be in the top 2? Picking groups.
Yeah, it's not like the most important thing, but it is pretty important. So in general, if you want to win, you gotta beat everyone.
Right.
Everyone, anyways. So it's nice.
It is nice to be able to, especially in Agro mentioned it earlier, there's kind of 5 teams that can go, one way or the other, and a couple of the teams at the bottom have been surprising. So being able to pick around that certainly would be nice. Final thoughts here. You're going up against the Bolts. Do you think your play style here as of late matches up pretty well against the Bolts and you're confident in getting a win?
I'm not sure. I really don't know what they play, honestly. They might pull out anything. Like, they're the team that could just whip anything out. So I'm not sure, but we're feeling pretty good lately.
Sure, absolutely. Well, excited to watch what the Bolts bring out. Excited to see what the Titans bring out. Game number 1, right around the corner. Paul, thanks for your time. I'll let you go get ready.
Thanks.
There you have it. Paul and the rest of the guys feeling pretty confident, as they should, as they are sitting at 5-1 with just 1 game remaining up against the Bolts. But like he said, Miff, the Bolts are a type of team that you never know exactly what they're going to pull out.
Yeah, some weeks they're looking like the best to have ever done it. There was that streak earlier this year where they had, 7 straight wins. They were looking nigh unstoppable, and then sometimes the Bolts kind of settle into this middle-of-the-pack style mentality where they're just – it feels like just treading water almost. And I think as the season rolls out, as we get closer and closer to Worlds, we're going to get more in line what we expect from the Bolts earlier this year, and that these guys are some tried-and-true competitors. But you can speak to this maybe more so as you do have that podcast with Barracuda. I think one of the main strengths of the Bolts as a team is their unflappable mentals. It feels like regardless of a winner or loss, these guys are just having a good time.
Yeah, and you know what? I gave them a lot of gruff for it at the beginning of the year. The mandatory fun time and all that kind of stuff, and these team building exercises that they were doing. But I think they really made a difference for this team. I think that when you talk to them and just kind of hang out with them, they seem to really enjoy each other's company. Not that every other team, they all hate each other, but I think the Bolts are probably the closest knit group among the SPL, and certainly that has helped them. It makes it a little bit easier to swallow some of those tough moments that you'll have throughout the year.
And, well, we can also talk about some of their just premier players, right? I'd say that Lazra in particular has been stepping up. Ven as well has been looking incredibly strong out of the mid lane. Maybe doesn't have as eclectic a god pool as some of these other guys. I'm talking about, the Pauls of the world, the Dardezes, the people along those lines. But when Ven is allowed to play something that fits his playstyle, that man can run a lobby. And when I say his playstyle, I'm talking about Raijin. His Raijin's really good.
Yeah, his Raijin's really good, and so is the Morrigan. And that's a pick that if Paul's been prioritizing recently, I mean, you think back to when this Bolts team was playing at their best during the summer phase. I think that it was when Veneno was playing things like the Morrigan a whole lot. So that's the direction I want to see them go back to, is a little bit more aggressive through the mid lane and let Ven be your fight starter.
I think so. And, I'll be honest, it's not often that I go back and try and figure out how to beat a team composition, but I think, and I said it during the last time we saw the Tartarus Titans play, that the drafts they were bringing felt nigh unstoppable. It just felt like no matter what you were doing, they had an answer to it. So I actually went back and watched through, as if I were a player still, trying to figure out what I would do up against like the Morrigan Cthulhu compositions. And I think that the trapping a lot of these teams fall into is that they allow Benji to rotate in for free and go into that Descent into Madness and create space for guys like Paul to then come in a little bit later, and if he's on the Morgan, be that secondary Cthulhu, or if he's playing the Aphrodite, just make sure that Benji's allowed to play safe. And I know it sounds incredibly simple, but Paul has been positioning like an assassin more often than not inside of these team fights, almost as a solo agent, very, very deep in his own backline, waiting for the team fight to start up proper. So I think when you have a mid laner positioned like that, it becomes the job of either the solo laner or the jungler on the other side to try and isolate him inside the engagement. Sanford Soccer legitimately became very close to finding an answer inside of that last Jade Dragons and Tartarus Titans set, in that Nemesis probably does exactly what you need. If you're able to remove a lot of Paul's HP bar pre-fight before he transforms, well, all of a sudden you're transforming into a half-health Cthulhu, which is a lot easier to deal with. So I'm excited to see what the Bolts draft here. I know that Lazra in particular is a guy that can play some gods that would make it very hard for Paul to perform on the last 2 picks that he's been going towards. Aphrodite and the Morrigan are going to struggle against things like the Kamazots or the Serket. So we'll see if the Bolts bring that.
Also worth noting the Tartarus Titans, whether or not it's related to their recent success, but they have picked up Oceans as their coach. You see him right back there in the player booth with them, and we'll see how he can help them pilot these picks and bans up against the Olympus Bolts. Is the Bolts immediately taking away something that has been a big part of the Titan success, that set ADC. absolutely critical. And the Titans taking away some comfort picks on the other side in the Serket and the Terra.
Yeah, that Serket ban, I think, is going to hurt the Bolts pretty mightily here. And set ban, I think, is something we can expect to see up against the Tartarus Titans just about full stop. I don't care who's playing against him. Nobody wants to line up against Cyclone Spin Set because he just runs lanes. I mean, there comes a point in the game where Set gets 2-3 items in, and you're no longer allowed to fight him, legitimately. If he closes gap on you, you're probably just taking that 1v1 every single day of the week. So the Bolts say, well, what better way to deal with it than to just ban it out?
So now you've got options if you're the Titans. The Morrigan, Cthulhu, and Geb all available, and those are the three that kind of stand out to me for what the Titans want to do. And the good news for the Bolts is that those are all in different roles. So you can just take the two that the Titans don't select here, assuming they go one of those three. Which of those three would you like to see them go?
I think the Titans, if they were to go one of those three, I would have said probably the Morrigan because there's that overlap in the mid. We know that Ven looks very good on that pick. And when I think of the Bolts, I'm not thinking of that Cthulhu style of play, so I'm not sure how willing they would have been to take that one away in their own right. But the Tartarus Titans taking Geb first up overall, I mean, I can't argue against it. It is just a very consistent pick. Inside the late game, Cataclysm now is an incredibly huge threat. You can honestly, with a Soul Laner, probably find some solo kills from the damage output of this Geb. And now you've got Stone Shield to make sure that whoever else is on your team is feeling a little bit safer.
77% win rate.
Oh, wow.
Geb. So that's a little bit, I think that's pretty telling. As how about 80% for Cthulhu? He's won 8 out of his 10 games that he's been played in this phase, and he will be selected here by the Olympus Bolts. And like I was saying, Venenu is a Morrigan player. I wouldn't hate to see them go that direction.
Uh-oh.
And that is where they go. They just pull it straight from the Titans playbook.
Yeah, can we get a cam on Oceans right now? I'm sure my man is pulling out his hair, just upset that essentially the core of the compositions that the Titans have been going for has been completely stripped away here by the Olympus Bolts. I'd argue that they've done just about enough to make the Titans have to show us something different here this week.
I mean, no set either, so that definitely those aspects of the composition won't be available, but the Titans solidifying their front line even more. It's Nike, and we have seen Nike flex into the jungle in the past, so it's possible it could be going to layers. But I have to imagine this is going to be for Benji over there in that solo lane.
Yeah.
And it is an Aphrodite for Paul, and as good as Cthulhu is, he just zones away backline. He doesn't really 100 to 0 them. He needs help on that dive if he's going to do it. Afro is a character that I feel like Cthulhu does not threaten me at all. I don't have to respect him a whole lot. Camazotz might make up for that, though, and this is a pick for Lasbra that can actually put some threat onto the Afro.
Yeah, it could make that Afro's life very hard throughout the early game, and I think I echo your same thoughts. Cthulhu is a great god for chasing out kills, but Aphrodite, when she's linked up with somebody, additional movement speed, you're giving her anyone you're linked with additional power as well. You've got a slow from back off as well as a knockaway, so I think Afro should feel safe in the team fight proper once you get into the 5-on-5 engagement, but I'm keeping my eyes more so on that early game phase. If there's two Camazotz running at you, I don't care how undying your love is, you're probably falling down.
It's very hard to live through that dive, even with an Aphrodite. And the big thing now, if I'm the Bolts, is I'm just taking picks off the board that can actually kill Cthulhu. Because if the one thing is for Aphrodite, yeah, Cthulhu doesn't threaten her, but she doesn't threaten Cthulhu
Not
either.
at all.
So you need someone here for the Titans. And this is what I was talking about with the Valkyries composition, where they go up against Cthulhu, they pick Achilles, which actually can kill him with Fatal Strike. He just needs some Hunter damage to do it. And then they didn't pick a Hunter. And so that's why I was kind of losing my mind. I like these bans from the Bolts. I mean, Erlong Shen, not necessarily the late game Cthulhu killer, but really good for layers, brings good control, and then taking that Achilles out of his hands makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's really a good ban here, but, and maybe you could speak to this as well, Aggro. Back in the day, it really was Nemesis as the answer to Cthulhu. It could have been the Executes, but more so, back in the console days, Ho Yeet was one of the major answers to Cthulhu. That mark just makes it so much easier to finish off this large, generally immobile target. The lower HP he falls, the easier it is for you to shred him. And we know that Cyclone Spin is very comfortable on that pick, and with the Tartarus Titans kind of being the forerunners of the Morrigan Cthulhu draft, maybe they have that answer in their back pocket.
Also good against the Morrigan because you can mark her while she's stealth, follow her as she's going. I think that the Hui pick would be good, though I know the Smite Reddit loses their minds every time Ho Yi gets locked in.
I think that guy's just good.
He's good.
He's just good.
He's not winning a whole lot, but I think that's too results-based to be thinking that way. As Ymir is the pick, and this is something that dominated the early parts of the year, has been played once this phase and lost, but I think is sick up against what the Titans have.
I
Just
mean,
sick.
Geb, Aphrodite, you're stuck. You're just stuck.
Toast.
I mean, early game, Geb, in his most exploitable state, pretty easy to lock him down. Ymir going to be a great answer for that one. Even Susano, to a certain extent, going to struggle a little bit up against this Ymir as long as that third ability is down. So I think this pick makes a lot of sense. Now you've got a crazy front line built around you, the Morrigan. Cthulhu creates infinite space. Camazotz can do so with damage, but more so going to be acting as that kind of solo agent inside the team fight. And Ymir, I mean, I don't think you could ask for better peel. Even up against a god like Bakasura, and I know you have strong feelings about Bakasura full stop, but Regurgitate does not work when Ymir exists. Just drop that wall. All of a sudden, your AoE autos, you're done.
Yeah, I mean, no traditional hunter here for the Titans, and clearly this is something they're comfortable doing. With the set ADC has been a huge part of Cyclone Spin's repertoire as of late, but I think there's a big difference between someone like Baka, who I'd assume to be the ADC
Agreed.
with this comp, and Set. The gap close is not even close. Set's is so much better, and I think that's a huge part of what makes him successful. Baka can, I mean, it's a chin-sized god at the very least, so theoretically he could chase down and kill this Cthulhu. I don't hate it as much as I feel like I should if I were to be looking at this draft by itself.
Look, you've got Geb and you've got Aphrodite. Both gods are going to facilitate this Bakasura incredibly well.
Yep.
If you hit a lead early on, Ymir can fall down if you're able to utilize Regurgitate properly. Make sure you keep that jump available to deal with the wall. Izanami as well. Going to be very easy to lock down, although Dark Portal kind of deals with Regurgitate minions pretty easily. You're going to silence the Baka, so now all of a sudden your leap isn't available, as well as that AoE damage. Going to deal with all the minions spawn up. But I will say, Bakasura's additional movement speed and attack speed from his passive makes it a lot easier to find some of these trades early on.
Yeah, and could easily go something like an Erendite here for the Susano, track down some of these stealth characters on the other side. Pretty interesting matchup here in a very pivotal game to close out Phase 3. Let's throw it over to the casters for game number 1. It's Dave and Gore bringing you the action.
You're right, it is Aggro, Dolson, Gore, and I think Doug, unless basically is subbing in for us. It is Doug for Gore and I on the camera here. Titans versus Bolts. It is the SPL match of the week, and Goremizer, it is maybe the most important match of the week. Actually, you know what? It is as of right now. And then future matchups become more important when it comes to tiebreakers, plus minuses, things like that. But all of the speculation, all of the seeding, it could be done depending on if the Titans are able to win this one or not.
And honestly, there's, again, like you said, plus minuses, things like that. Numbers get involved eventually. But if the Titans just win, it simplifies a whole lot of problems on the back
from our
end.
brain, we hope they don't get involved. Not that we're going in biased, but it becomes a lot easier to talk about who's in what seed if the Titans end up winning this. And Gore, they come into a set controlling their own destiny without the set. Instead, it's a Bakasura for Cyclone Spin.
Yeah, and I'm excited to watch this. I mean, Bakasura, like, way long ago, this is something that not only has been successfully done as a carry, but has been successfully done by Cyclone, I want to say, in solo lane as well. Like, I mean, this is a god that he should know and does know pretty well. And it's got a lot of good damage. Granted, there's a lot of good peel on the side of the Bolts. And so I'm wondering how he's going to fit in and slot in with the rest of the Titans, especially during the team fight later on. I think there's a lot of damage that could be said to be done against specifically the Cthulhu here. Having true damage on Butcher Blades really helps out that often. But we haven't seen him a lot lately. I mean, Scream's been playing him occasionally in the jungle. With Ymir on the other side, complicates things a little bit for Cyclone Spin in a lot of these engagements.
Yeah, I mean, this Titans draft is a high execution style composition, it feels like. I mean, you got something simplistic in mid-Gore, right? I mean, Paul talked about it in the early game, where you get the Aphrodite, you get something survivable in the solo lane, and with the Mace Tree being as strong as it is, you drop the Undying Love and it becomes simple. On the other side, Gore, it almost feels like the Bolts just have a Titans draft the way the Titans have drafted the last couple of weeks. Morgan plus Cthulhu. Hell, even down to the Camazotz, Ymir, and Izanami feel Titans-esque.
Yes.
but it has been proven, hasn't it? I mean, now it's kind of a rock and a hard place style, an immovable object and an unstoppable force style game here. Can Aphrodite plus Nike win outright against a Morgan Cthulhu? Because both compositions, mid plus solo lane, that team fight dynamic, it's going to change the face of the game.
The good news is Aphrodite inherently makes someone hard to kill.
Jake locked in place, knocked up by Aurora and left alone. Awesome Jake The med is pulsing on out. That'll give him some heals. You gotta
Wow.
get this kill at some point on the back end. The get back will slow down Awesome Jake, and the Tartarus Titans able to lock down first blood.
I want to say impressive that he lived that long. A lot of the heavy lifting there being done by Med, maybe just the lack of Titan's damage being able to follow it up, but a little bit of aggression from the Bolts punished heavily, with Jake being left, like you said, kind of out to rot by his team. Not much of a fight that is going to be worthwhile for you there as well. If you get the red buff, it's a big win. If Venenu dies as well, that's such a devastating hit for them. Ultimately, just a Ymir. You can shrug it off. Not having your meditation for a little bit is probably going to be felt in any engagements, early skirmishes. And getting Susano online a little bit earlier, letting layers be impactful this game early on, that's dangerous territory to be in, especially because even though Kamazots can start fighting anytime now, I have a feeling that we might have a little bit before we get to see Lazarus hands-on.
And important that Aurora able to tick over to level 4 as well. Was just a bit behind Awesome Jake in the early game. Jake reached level 2 before Aurora had gotten there, and so Aurora jumps a little bit of XP above Awesome Jake as well. It does feel, Gore, admittedly, like a bit of a rite of passage for Jake. Almost every game where he plays Ymir feels like starts off 0 and something, and then somehow turns the game around and carries things on later on. So
Yeah.
not all that surprising that there's an early death onto Jake, but it's about the next few moments where he can find some impact. For now, it's a good wall. A Cyclone Spin is hit level 5. Aurora not there just yet, but already an ultimate used here in duo.
And that's the big difference maker as this Ymir goes on from this early game to late game. That's a great wall. But wall, at this level, it's up for a little bit and then gone. It's something that you can follow through with if your team is capable.
Lasbra blinks in onto layers. Does have Bat Out of Hell. That's important to look at here. So if you think it might be an overcommit from Lasbra, he has a get out of jail free card. But how about this? Everything onto Aurora. And Awesome Jake right on cue will throw up the wall, force Aurora around to the side, and the Olympus Bolts pick up a kill. And it's Barracuda on the Izanami, needing fractionally less time to scale now with the kill in the back pocket.
And feels really solid being able to find such a big rotation. Again, it's just onto the support, but they follow through with a red buff steal as well. You do see Paul get the little, what are they, Minotaurs, Scorpions, whatever they are in the red camp.
Something like that.
They get the little minis, and then he gets a little experience, but now Lazarus caught out.
Oh, Lasbra is still here.
Oh,
Does
good
have
Bat
Bat Out of Hell. And my God, he has no HP. Probably 9 more than he needed. The health potion will take over. So 54 after a couple ticks of the health pot. What really matters is that this Kamazot stays alive, Gore. There's pressure kind of seeded on the left side of the map. Now the Greater Scorpion will get locked in for the Olympus Bolts. We'll get a look back at the Bolts' first kill of the game.
And again, this is just good positioning. You have a really good call from Jake. He gets the freeze very early on.
Yep.
A good placed wall as well right there just to cut off the pathing. I mean, that's about as easy as it can get. And that brings us back to the Ymir. We were talking about it a little earlier. But it's level as you go on. You get better stun. You have more damage all of a sudden from your carpet. You're slow from the Frostbite passive's always there. But your wall lasts longer every level. It's one of those things that before, it was a double-edged sword. You'd throw it up, and if it was a good wall, sick. You got a like 5-second great wall. If it was a bad wall, your team's waiting for it to fall down. The fact that you can cancel it now has really opened up
huge.
so much for Jake here. And that's why, you know, like you said, it wouldn't be surprising if he's 0-3, 0-4, and then all of a sudden he is the reason a lot of late-game team fights could potentially end up happening. It's because of how much he can control this jungle. And we've already gotten to see that way more in 6 minutes than I thought we were going to. And that's the thing to worry about, especially with the Cthulhu on the inside as well.
Laz has just been, you know, half HP or lower, it feels like, for the last couple of minutes here. Luckily, Kamazots has some sustain baked into that kit. Benji knows Laz is on this side of the map. Benji also has ultimate, does not have leap anymore. Sentinel of Zeus used. But this not all that hidden by the Olympus Bolt score. Benji's just going to get chased down here, and it looks like Haddix will notch his first kill of the game.
It's 2 ults dropped, but you get the kill. That's always going to feel worthwhile, and especially for Haddix's Cthulhu. We've seen it from the Titans you had highlighted earlier. It's disruptive, I guess is the best way to describe it. It is a lot to handle in the middle of a team fight. He takes up so much of your screen. He's large. He's too much to handle. And it's something that I think is going to swing relatively hard. I mean, it's not necessarily the damage numbers he puts out as much as the damage numbers he takes. Nobody's able to kill him while he's able to get so much in terms of disruption. And Nike, you saw that. She goes up for the shield. Looks like, you know, this is great. In most scenarios, I'm blocking damage, and I can knock someone back. And in this case, Benji just has to watch the damage get thrown at him anyway.
Yep. Benji Gore starts Jotun's Wrath here. on Nike. And so lots of damage connecting onto Benji there. Tankiness will have to wait just a little bit longer, so maybe that's where you see some of that squishiness as Haddock's able to find a small advantage here. And on the flip side, Haddock's has gone a good defensive starter with that Breastplate of Valor.
It's this weird combo. They both get cooldown, but, and admittedly for the same reasons, Haddock's way more beneficial in the immediate lane matchup just because now he's going to take less damage, and he should be able to survive something like this.
Right, less damage, but there's still a lot of it.
Never mind.
Is making his way on over to the solo lane, picks up his second kill of the game on the Susano, and that's what the doctor ordered, isn't it, for Benji? You go a little bit behind a moment before, you get punished for an early damage item, you get the help from your jungler after the fact. Nice double knockup from Aurora in the mid lane.
What a wall!
And a good wall from Jake, but has it kept Aurora right where he wants to be? Layers teleports right back into the fight. Also, Jake whittled away. Undying Love is there as well, and Paul with the burns will get the last bit of damage. Lazarus swoops on through, returns the favor on the Layers. Venenu's transformed into the Nike here. Important to differentiate between those two as the Titans roll forward and get a couple.
That is such a great wall turned disastrous for the Bulls. I mean, it is a great block for a retreat. If your team is engaging on that, that feels great. The fact that the Titans not only turned around, but confidently, I mean, they swarmed the Bolts from that moment because you're going into this very narrow pathway. I mean, that's perfect. Geb knockup's going to work well. You've got Cyclone's been making a rotation, and you've got this Susano on your team. If they all pile up like they did in that pathway from the mid camps to the lane, and it's just free real estate for you. I mean, you're absolutely going to find damage there for free. Admittedly, killing Jake feels like one thing, but following through, being able to get another kill, I think it just opened up a lot of opportunities. The Bolts maybe misread the situation a little early on.
Important, though, for the Bolt score that they're able to at least trade back one kill onto Layers, who has 100% kill participation. Up to this point, grabs one death as the Olympus Bolts transfer one kill back to the Tartarus Titans. And all of this score, I mean, there's been plenty of action swinging back and forth. No surprise when it's these two teams that are playing. No real gold lead on one side or the other. Blue buff taken away by the Olympus Bolts. A small chase here on the right side of the map. Benji sensing maybe some help incoming, uses that Sentinel of Zeus. That'll slow down Haddox for the time being, who answers with his ultimate there as well. Looks like both solo laners will drop the ults and head on out from the fight as Haddox will claim his own blue.
And honestly, Sentinel Zeus, you know, losing that for Benji means that you can be less risky in a lot of team fights. Losing Haddox's ult usually determines whether or not your team can team fight, period. At least on the right-hand side of the map, right? You still got plenty going for you. Whenever you've got Bat out of Hell, Vin still has his ult as well, so it's not like you're really too worried. But at the same time, it slows you down a little bit, so waiting for Haddox to get that back up. Admittedly, not much to fight around on the right-hand side of the map. Pyromancer is a famous one for the Bolts to try and start with and go for early on.
Yep.
But even at this point, it doesn't feel like there's a large enough grouping, or at least a large enough amount of damage over there, for them to even start that up. Until Barra starts making some sweeping rotations, it's probably on the back burner for a while.
Here's the big difference in this game right now, Gordon. It's the 2-level lead for Venenu in the mid lane. Paul has rotated out of lane a little bit, been semi-effective, 3 out of 4 kills affected. But that's also kept Paul out of lane, whereas Venenu's been able to hang around. The fight has come to Venenu and the 2 assists that the Morgan has for Ven. So maybe 1.5, 2 levels in the mid lane, important to look at moving forward. Maybe putting some extra pressure on Ven, or if you're the Bolts, funneling some extra pressure there through the mid lane with that small advantage. Some anti-heal starting to roll its way in here, Goremizer. Divine Ruin for Ven, Brawler's Beat Stick for both Laz and Layers. And with a little bit of the healing in this game, important to get those items on, as the Bolts will head towards the Pyro.
Not only that, but they also have the Tainted Steel online for Barra, so a lot of anti-heal that is focused in for them, and you're going to need it. I like the fact that they've gone it this early. Like, you can skip that first item. Aphrodite, up to this point, hasn't been as big a thorn on your side as she's going to be over the next 5 minutes, and then from there to the rest of the game. You've already got a Lotus Crown for Paul, so you have to deal with a lot of that damage.
You need it.
In fact, Jake is just behind now, should and might be going into some sort of anti-heal here, but also Cursed Ankh, I'm going to assume, is going to be his relic choice in a couple of levels, and that's going to all be important for them. The Titans right now already are dealing a lot of damage, but have a lot of survivability just from this Afro.
Haddox, remember, got ganked by Layers earlier on in this game. This time, though, the Cthulhu seems tanky enough that it's going to require a little extra effort in order to get a kill onto this Cthulhu. Layers still feels... Oh, well, Layers, of course. I was going to say Benji, but it's Layers is getting chunked down. Feels a little bit less tanky than what Haddix is bringing to the table here. So really both junglers score. If you look at some of the early pace and where it's been driven, Lair's off to a good start. Slowed down after he died there in the mid lane. Lasbro's been good on the kind of counter engage here. He finds his way to mid lane, and some damage connects onto the Camazotz. But sometimes up to this point, one jungler or the other is a bit behind. Lasbro, oh my goodness, from Cyclone Spin, the ultimate is going to force the ult out of Laz as well, and that's an early look gore. That's some of the damage that that this Bakasura for Cyclone Spin can do.
Yeah, so we talked a lot about, hey, Bakasura can get peeled easily, and there you kind of see some of that, I guess, where he doesn't get the kill, but you saw, like you said, the damage that he can put out. It doesn't take much. It doesn't take a lot of time for him to just focus someone down. If he gets Vin, Bara, hell, even Lasbra, if he's caught out without his ult, are all very easy kills for them.
Yeah, it does feel that way.
And I think that the Titans are going to be able to play around that. You always have to keep your eyes on his gun for the Jotuns early on. That's something that, you know, like, depending on how you look at it, look, you've got more Butcher Blades that are coming available, but I think just as important, your ult's coming up a little bit more often as well. And that opens up a lot of opportunities. That Cripple Field is massive when you think about it. It slows down Vin, Laz, and Bara from a disengage. And so unless Jake or Haddix are right there ready to peel for it, you're going to either burn relics or you're going to get a kill, maybe both in some scenarios. And Cyclone Spin can be a very heavy-handed carry for the Titans.
Shielding from the Erendite should and maybe could also play an impact on some of these fights.
Plus chasing people down, right?
Yeah, plus chasing people down.
He's just happy.
He's just happy. Look, and the more chasing that a Bakasura can do, the happier they are. Barracuda, I wouldn't say it's felt uncomfortable in this lane just yet. About a 1-level lead is what Cyclone Spin has been able to maintain, but it's been solo pressure onto basically every purple buff that Barracuda's tried to take. Cyclone Spin has been there with the Devour, maybe makes it easier to take some of that away. Awesome, Jake reads that well, and you can see Barracuda takes his purple buff. Jake is here just to make sure that the enhanced purple doesn't go away. And Gore, actually, I think that's an important magnifying glass on something that could happen later on in this game. Is the jump on out from Cyclone Spin, where, you know, Paul a bit immobile, but does have Undying Love. You know, Roar, a good target to lock in with some of those walls. Benji can jump on out. Cyclone Spin can as well. And so the survivability of this Bakasura, something that can be called into question, but might feel all right against Jake in this game.
The walls are something you can avoid, save for a Roar like that, save for the Aphrodite as well. But the good news is, and this is something that is strictly from choice of assassin, you have put yourself in a position where, yes, you can avoid walls. Freezes are still going to be very applicable. You have to go beads for that. Cyclone Spin does so. But because you're an assassin, and specifically because you're Bakasura, you need some sort of engage that still enables your disengage. You don't want to jump in and then get walled off. So he had to go blink as a second relic. That means that the Aegis that we typically see out of this sort of position is no longer an option, no longer viable for them. And so there are going to be spots where Cyclone Spin could still be caught out and taken down.
Lots of damage onto Barracuda, lots of damage onto Cyclone Spin as well. Erendite helping out around the back end, and Lasbra into the bat out of hell at super low HP once again. Cyclone Spin will survive, Lasbra will survive as well. And that turnaround damage, of course, now made its way onto Lasbra a couple of times from Cyclone Spin. And so already we're seeing the Camazotz is not having the easiest time of getting in and finding this burst damage onto Cyclone Spin, at least unconnected. And so Cyclone able to trade out pretty effective there.
It's like an alternative form of Aegis, which is I don't have to, like, I'll still take damage, but I'm going to kill you as fast as I can to make you second guess trying to kill me
I'm
off.
taking no damage because there's none more to be taken because you're not delivering it to me anymore.
Either stay here and I kill you or leave, as the option Cyclone Spin has really been presenting. I also think it should be fun, you know, when you look at this, not having a hunter tends to limit some things, you know, from range is really the big changer, right?
Wow.
You have an assassin here, you should be able to burn Gold Furies, you should be able to burn towers.
Jake will not steal away the Gold Fury. It goes quietly to the Tartarus Titans. And a decent little gold spike here, Gore. It's been very, very even as far as gold goes. Now you're about 400 or 500 gold in the lead if you're the Tartarus Titans. Not backbreaking if you're the Olympus Bolts. But a nice little infusion if you're the Titans, though. As we so often see from the Bolts, it's an immediate answer on the right side of the map. The Pyromancer, the neutral objective on the right. Going right back to the Olympus Bolts, happy to trade out.
And this is, I guess, kind of like Retribution. Like, you can see the small spike around 1253, I guess is where the marker says on the chart. A little before that, first Pyromancer that gets taken by the Bolts. Giant spike back up for the Gold Fury just now from the Titans, but then a nice little chunk from the Pyromancer. Little things that are ultimately even everything right back to nothing as big of a lead. The most important thing has to be how low this tower is on right. I mean, that's going to be, as little as it is, a nice swing on this side of the map. No real pressure in either of the mid towers. Realistically, I mean, a little bit of damage being dealt to the Titans, both in mid and duo, but neither of these teams has made a huge map-sweeping presence as of just yet, outside of these neutral objectives. Which brings me back to the conversation I was mentioning earlier, not just being able to burn down, you know, your Fire Giants, your Gold Furies, your Pyromancers, as we saw the Titans do with that Gold Fury. While they don't have the range, if Cyclone Spin gets under a tower, the tower's gonna die. It's going to die just as quickly. It's not the same case as sometimes when you have, I guess, like a slower start or someone, you know, if you look at some of the Magical Hunters, it takes a little longer for them to get onto that tower killer stage. And so they are still going to have a lot of that pressure, just significantly lacking the distance that you typically get and safety that you typically get out of those picks on the other side.
Well, Gore, we have been on a just kind of steady climb up in the XP department. A little bit before, the Titans were up about 2,000 in that category. And you would say, all right, Dave, it's the 2-level lead that Benji's got in solo, but that's kind of countered out by the 2-level lead that Venenu's got in mid. Sort of the 1-level lead in both jungle, mid, and hunter that makes the difference. Can you close that gap? A kill on a Cyclone Spin sure would help. No Aegis, no chance, and Lasbra finally deals with this pesky Bakasura. Cyclone Spin has been so successful in repelling that attack up to this point, but Barracuda plus Laz is enough this time to get the Bolts a kill and some gold.
And right after a huge talk about the map state, you get the tier 1 tower on left, you almost take the tier 2. Bear's got to be careful.
Layers needs the shield from Aurora, but look at the Bolter, it's running in immediately behind the Tartarus Titans. Venenu transforms into the Nike and sends a Sentinel of Zeus right beneath the tier 2 tower as Haddix is there running down layers. Susano, no chance to live. You can say the same for the tier 2 tower. Benji immediately jumps back in. Big Cataclysm from Aurora might send this fight right on back. Barracuda survives by the skin of his teeth. And it looks like Benji will do so as well. It's a couple towers and a couple kills for the Bulls.
That Aussie passive sweating with how much work. I mean, Barra barely gets out of there now. He's going to be feeling a little bit better. His health bar is still in the red, just ticked over to yellow. But, I mean, barely able to escape that one. But they get the pressure they need. They show off that they can counteract Paul's healing. They have the Curse Dunk from Haddix, and exactly how well they can control it. They collapsed in on that tower instantaneously, and it felt like that was going to be a really good engage specifically for the Titans. I mean, they had Barra on the ropes, but the problem is now you can see it specifically from Haddix's view. They're separated, 3 under the tower. The other 2 are, God knows where. They're around the purple buff. They're chasing down Barracuda as of right now. And you can see Benji joining the fight. Way too late, it feels like, to really find to separate. It doesn't have the damage follow-up for the Cataclysm. They just got separated really early on. The Bolts doing a great job showcasing Barra as bait, and also how well Haddix is able to separate a team fight.
You know what has been interesting, Gore, is following with Venenu in a lot of these team fights. Ven is now 3 levels up over Paul. When we see Morgan plus Cthulhu, I think we automatically assume that it's going to be double Cthulhu in these team fights. And effectively, every transformation that I've seen Ven go for so far, it has been the Nike instead. Doesn't seem like a horrible secondary option. I mean, two Cthulhus has already made its mark here on this league. But a different set of utility plus tankiness maybe is what you get out of the Nike. And pairing that with the Cthulhu is a bit oppressive.
You get the annoyance of Nike, and specifically you get a Sentinel of Zeus on your side. All of a sudden, a nice huge team-wide slow. They do have a Heavenly, so if Aurora has that available, yeah, that can counter it. But how often are these lining up so much that Vin is transforming into the Nike, and you see this out of Aurora for the counter? Either way, you get a big slow that then leads into Haddix having easy knockups, really good control, good walls from Jake that make things a lot easier. I actually like the call from him because no matter what, like you said, you're just going to control the flow of the Titans really well. And whether you have 2 Cthulhus doing it or if you add the Nike into the mix, I think it's all beneficial for the Bolts.
Right.
And we've seen it work out several times. I'm happy that you mentioned it, though, because I would, if you had asked me, back against the wall, knife to my throat, what Vin has been transforming into, I could have only told you that it was not Cthulhu. That's the only thing I know, because he's been very much a facilitator as of right now, as opposed to maybe a hard carry like we see out of the Morgan.
Well, you know if it's 2 Cthulhus, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. That's how I know it's not 2 Cthulhus.
Right. Anyone else can kind of blend into the team fights, but you can't miss a second Cthulhu running things down in the mid lane. So this game has been broken open just a little bit after what was a very quiet first 18 minutes, effectively dead even in the gold department, XP going one way or the other. But now the Olympus Bolts on the back end of a couple towers, a couple of kills, able to carve out A nice 2.5, nearly 3,000 gold lead in both gold and XP. XP still matters. A couple of the players on the Bolts outside of Awesome Jake yet to reach level 20. So nice and ahead are the Olympus Bolts at this point. First Fury of the game, that was gold. Win over to the Tartarus Titans. Now Primal has spawned. Barracuda doing a whole lot of damage to it, but it has been dropped. Benji has found the back line, and it's a perfect target. The Barracuda effectively kiting backwards, immediately pulled back in by Layers, and Layers deletes the 80 carry for the Olympus Bolts, but bye-bye health bars. The Olympus Bolts chasing down Layers, chasing down Cyclone Spin. It's a double for Haddix.
I mean, that's exactly the trade you want. Now Paul's in trouble.
Paul walled on off, and here comes a bat out of hell from Lasbra. Lasbra will notch one onto Paul. Massive cataclysm from Aurora, but he's looking around with nobody else at his side. It's a double-double for the Olympus Bolts. 2 for Haddix, 2 for Laz. Benji's the 5th, but he might make it out.
Paul was trying his best to put on some Shadow Q impersonations there, but that Aphrodite just can't juke that much. There's too many things being thrown at you. A great wall,
right
once again, from Jake. And the only downside is you technically don't have Bear here, but look at the ward coverage. This has actually been very important. Bolts had vision over on the left-hand side. They knew what was going on. You get a beautiful 1-for-4 trade with a lot of great control from your frontliners, but they also had vision over on the right-hand side in terms of control. You can hold this for 5 seconds for Barra easily.
Benji will make things interesting for. He still has Sentinel of Zeus, still has the jump in, still has the ability to steal this away, and you might need to if you're Benji. Sentinel of Zeus gets used, Fire Giant delayed. Barracuda is alive here, but Benji, ever so pesky, pinned back by the Pyro, and Haddix does so much work there in keeping Benji at bay. Benji will be unsuccessful in his steal. The Olympus Bolts complete their destiny after that team fight, and it's Fire Giant on all 5.
I'd still say admirable try from Benji. Just showing face there. The downside is that Haddix is really good at his job and keeps you zoned. The Pyromancer throwing in a couple of hits as well, just to make sure. The ult getting used, the leap getting used a little too early before the Fire Giant falls down. They slowed DPS on that objective really well from the Bolts to buy themselves not only the time for Bear to respawn, but really to just worm through Benji's kit to make sure he had nothing to fight with. Once you hit the brakes that hard, he just had nowhere to turn around and nowhere to get aggressive with. And now it opens up a lot of conversations. They already exposed a Phoenix on left. That's maybe the easiest way for the Bolts to go down. But there's so much gold sitting in mid. You can knock down 2 towers, put pressure on a Phoenix, put pressure potentially on 2 Phoenixes here with the kind of rotations they have. And this is where that lack of range really starts to hurt you just enough on the Titans. Cyclone Spin, as well as Layers, could make some really sick loops and get into the back line, cause some trouble for the Bolts. But if they don't have enough survivability to sit back there, then all of a sudden things start to get a little more iffy. You don't get out as easily. You're not as safe anymore. And so there are some plays, and I should recognize this. Watch where Cyclone Spin and watch where Layers are, because they're the ones that I think are going to have to open up the door for a comeback.
Corey, you talk about survivability, and I think to that point, where Layers and Cyclone Spin, the ones who are going to jump in, maybe make the backline uncomfortable for the Bolts. I think you look at what Jake has built here as well. Sovereignty plus Shell plus Med. Seems like a team that wants to group up around their Ymir.
Yeah.
Spread out some of those protections, some of those actives.
Oh, no.
My goodness. That's free for Lasbra, isn't it? I mean, he uses his blink, maintains his ultimate. Layers doesn't do all that much damage, if anything, to Laz, who walks out unscathed.
This is such a, look, this is great for the Bolts. There's 4 people on the Titans chasing down 2 over here. Okay, yeah, the backs are coming through. If I'm Barra, Haddix, and Jake, I am ecstatic seeing that there's 4 people on the other side of the map. You are more than happy to not only knock those towers down, if they didn't back right then, if they go for a fight, that's a Phoenix for free. Luckily, Titans do fall back. But now that it's virtually swapped, yeah, so you have to run to the left side. Lasbra and Vin are just such a dual threat. Plus, they have minions on the left.
Minute and a half on the FG buff. 15 seconds on Layers' respawn. Lasbra thankful to still have that bat out of hell because he has to use it there. Aurora with a decent knockup onto Barracuda, onto Jake, onto Haddix. 3 versus 2 on the right side of the map. Aphrodite and Bakasura kind of flexing back and forth between left and right, but a wave pushed out on left will allow the Tartarus Titans to group up a little bit more so over here on the right side of the map. So there's 1 minute left on the FG buff, Gore. You have to imagine there's some gold in the back pocket of the Bolts.
Yeah.
And it's a staging Fire Giant. You're staging for the end of the game. You open up all 3 Phoenixes. You've mentioned the caches of gold that were still there and waiting. Those have all been taken down. 2K gold in hand for effectively everyone on the Olympus Bolts. You're able to go back, buy up what could be a full item, upgrade those starters,
Yeah.
take this next FG, take the game, and you're in a great spot to give yourself a fighting chance at top 2.
And realistically, I mean, it's one of the, despite the lack of Phoenixes being taken, maybe one of the most efficient FG power plays you get. You get a good kill on the layers,
There's
but
no
you get
downtime,
all of
right?
those towers, and the most downtime you're experiencing is right now, the 30 seconds left until the FG buff disappears, which it's right on the cusp of enough time. Like, you could pressure a Phoenix, but it's probably a bad idea. Instead, I like, as you had highlighted, the back because of all the items they get, as well as being able to finish Barracuda's starter item. Again, anti-heal is very important for them there. You've got the Cursed Ankh available. You've got a Divine Ruin now available
that
on
is tough.
Tactics on top of that. And so I think you are winning a lot of these little engagements before they even happen up against the Titans.
Wow. I mean, Aurora has to spend the blink there, which feels brutal. And that is a lot of damage.
Oh, what
great
a good wall.
from Awesome Jake. Sentinel of Zeus has already been used by Benji. A wall of his own will keep Benji competitive for the time being, and then a shield out from Aurora. But now you've lost a decent little bit here. Actually, it was Bulwark of Hope, excuse me. So Sentinel of Zeus still there for Benji, but it was Bulwark that provided the initial shield, and then Aurora with the secondary shield. So at least for Benji, you still maintain your ultimate, but this is good from Cyclone Spin. The Olympus Bolts in a little bit of downtime. They send 5 to the right, and Cyclone giving a win condition over to the Titans by opening up a Phoenix.
Yeah, your biggest advantage if you're the Bolts right now, outside of the fact that the team fights have been very solid for you, and as we just saw, locking up Paul and Aurora seems to be pretty much on easy street for them, has been map state. I mean, you get all that gold, you had the Fire Giant buff, but you didn't get a Phoenix, so you don't have that added pressure of any fire minions anywhere. The only real advantage you got is that all of those Phoenixes are exposed. If you push up a wave, it's going to be able to find home.
Oh, the 1v1 between the assassins. So Venenu is here to provide a little bit of extra help, but that is big. Lasbra on a rampage on the Kamazat, and it is Cyclone Spin who goes down. This time, all layers evaporates, and Venenu picks up a big kill. Layers down for 55, Cyclone down for 45. The Olympus Bolts in a 5v3, chasing down the Tartarus Titans. Paul gonna get run down by Haddix here. Nice knock up on the back line, a double freeze from Awesome Jake, and Venenu finally shows us the second Cthulhu. And the Olympus Bolts score. Their eyes are on the mid-Phoenix. Their eyes are on the game.
I mean, this is such a solid state to go in. You've got 30 seconds left to work with. The biggest worry you have is maybe Paul, and that's not enough to stop you. He doesn't have the damage for it.
We will take a quick, deep breath when it feels like it's all but all said and done in game number 1. And the Olympus Bolt score, I think, an okay time to zoom out.
Yeah.
Feels like one of Aggro's patented 99%ers here for the Olympus Bolts.
All right.
You weather the storm. You can zoom out. How'd we get here if you're the Bolts?
Oh, okay. How'd we get here? That's way easier. I thought you were going to ask, how do you stop this if you're the
No.
Titans? And I was going to go, okay, so.
Miracle defense, miracle steal.
Somehow,
They were in the game.
Paul actually transforms into the Morrigan. Not something Aphrodite can do, but he does it anyway.
Yep.
Then they could probably win. I don't know. They don't. The damage, a lot of the
You're trying to come
setup
up
they
with
have
it
right
anyway,
here.
Gwen.
Yeah, it's because it's fun.
Why not?
How'd we get here? Realistically, the biggest openers are these solo kills. We got to see one
Yep.
during the Fire Giant. That was a big play for them. But a lot of it, even prior to that, was just these small skirmishes, the big ones that you didn't get to see a lot out of Layers, or Layers would dive deep. They killed Bara around that Fury, the Primal Fury fight, and then lost 4 in the process because everyone has to be so close quarters on the Titans. It's too tight-knit for them, and unfortunately the Bolts were just able to eat that alive. They've got Morrigan, who does a lot of really good high close-up damage.
Oh, yeah.
You've got Layers, who not only can do the exact same amount of damage, but can survive through a lot of that as well.
Yep.
And you've got a Cthulhu and a Ymir to control the flow and pacing of everything, with 2 gods on your side, 2 essential gods that can't leap over it, can't get around it, or anything like that. And we saw Paul in that fight get locked off by the wall. If you get things like that happening from the Bolts consistently, the draft from the Titans was just going to get eaten alive, and that's exactly what we got to see.
Yeah, unfortunate that the comp with the Bakasura is being eaten alive. The Olympus Bolts just shy of ending things here in game number 1. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll find ourselves a winner.
Welcome back, SMITE fans. Deepest apologies for the technical difficulties. Obviously, we are all pretty frustrated with how things have been going, but unfortunately, we will not be able to bring you the end of Game 1 versus the Bolts and the Tartarus Titans. But I do have some good news, and that's it ended exactly as we all expected. Right after we had our little hiccup there, the Bolts simply walked into the Titan room and ended the game. I asked them what happened in their own words, and I think I got a couple of different accounts of what happened. Lasber got a pentakill. Haddix also got a pentakill. Both Haddix and Venenu claimed they got the last on the Titan, and Barracuda said, and I quote, "I was dead." So,
I mean, yeah, I think you got it better there. Honestly, that was a treat.
There you go.
Maybe we're lucky.
Maybe. It was a pretty clean game there from the Bolts overall, though. So let's talk about the game in its entirety, Mifflin. Exactly what you were worried about, in that this Cthulhu felt untouchable by what the Titans had.
Yeah, the early game was very contentious throughout this one. It really came down to that Primal Fury fight where immediately it was looking good for the Titans, where they find the initial pick, and then after that, I mean, it was all Bolts. The Bolts take a 4-for-1 trade, pick up the Fury, head over to the Fire Giant from there, clear out every single tower, and post that, have a very large gold lead, start to regroup themselves around the Fire Giant for yet another dance, and the Tartarus Titans on their back foot get caught out inside the jungle, and, well, the rest is history. We know what happened after that. What did you say? Haddix and, Lasber both got pentakills, and Barracuda was dead.
That's what they told me, yeah.
But I think that this could be pretty indicative of what you were worried about a little bit earlier on during P's and B's, and that the Tartarus Titans may have shown a little bit too much of their hand a little bit too early. Feels like the Olympus Bolts said, "This is what you're looking for. Maybe we take it. We'll just do it ourselves."
Yeah, the Bolts definitely just exercising their right to pick the Titans' favorite gods and making it look awfully good. Venenu, obviously fantastic on the Morrigan. How about the game Lasber had on this Camazotz? I think he ended the game like 6-2 or something along those lines. And this Cthulhu just felt unstoppable. On the other side, Baka ADC, not particularly impressive.
Wasn't super impressive, but it didn't do poorly by any stretch. I think had the Tartarus Titans been able to establish a little bit more so of a lead in the early game, that Bakasura very well could have run away with a match. But I like Bakasura more than you do, just straight up.
As I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. Never once have I been outplayed by a Bakasura. Never once. They press 3, they press 4. It's a giant AoE. They have haste and katana. They can't miss. It doesn't. It takes nothing.
Well, I played Bakasura against you at various times in our careers.
Almost certainly under.
And I'm pretty sure I bobbed you with them. So I think I just disproved your theory right there.
Okay, well there you go. 6-2 was the record for Lasber. 0-3 for Cyclone Spin on that Bakasura. Did not end up making it work. Saw a really nice highlight from Jake's perspective of how he was able to help Barracuda get through that laning phase. This Ymir pick, I think, just so smart from the Bolts. Really came in with a good game plan up against Afro Geb. Felt like that's exactly what they expected the Titans to take, and had the perfect pick for it.
Yeah, Jake may have struggled throughout the early, but by the time the team fight phase rolled around, he was finding very impactful walls. Even Layers was struggling to reposition himself in these fights. Take a peek at the damage output. You could tell that Layers was struggling a little bit. 8,000 damage from the Susano compared to their support, which did 6,000.
Yeah, not quite enough out of the Susano there for the Tartarus Titans. So we'll see what adjustments the Titans want to make. I wonder if they choose to go second pick in this spot, because that seemed, they got a priority pick, maybe the priority pick right now in Geb, and then the other team just took Cthulhu the Morrigan, and they felt like they had lost a lot. So I wonder if they just elect for second pick this time.
If I'm them, I mean, yeah, I'm 100% going for that. You at least guarantee yourself one of the puzzle pieces. You're maybe getting the Morrigan for yourself. Maybe you at least get that Cthulhu, but certainly aren't going to be losing both from that second pick position. That said, I want to see the Tartarus Titans, if they are forced into a position yet again to pull out something different, maybe go towards a little bit more so the standard. Instead of this Bakasura ADC, your Aphrodite didn't look nearly as good as it normally does with the composition that the Tartarus Titans like to go towards. So instead of kind of hanging on by a thread to this old style play, I know the Tartarus Titans are very capable of playing standard Smite, and when they are put in a position where their pieces are stripped, I don't think they should hold on to that style.
Yeah, I think that it comes down to the fact that set ADC is really good. That does not necessarily mean that assassin ADCs
Agreed.
are good. And maybe it is a set exclusive look for not just Cyclone Spin, but for the rest of the SPL as well. I think they were clearly missing that traditional hunter in their draft. We'll see if they decide to change that up in Game 2 picks and bans, as we're getting prepared to go into those shortly. But it doesn't seem like the Titans are too pressed about how it's going. You know, obviously a pretty important game for them here to secure that top 2 seed, but seem to be pretty loose still.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's weighing too heavily on their minds as of right now, and that is the sign of a strong team being able to hold on to that mental fortitude in a game point situation. But the Olympus Bolts do not often fumble. I mean, when they are looking good, they continue to do so, and I'd argue the Bolts are looking very good right now.
Let's get started then. Picks and bans for game number 2 about to start. The Bolts and the Tartarus Titans. It will be the Titans in the second pick position. As we were theorizing, they may go into the Bolts now. I wonder, I mean, after that performance, I think it isn't as easy as just going back and you expect the Bolts to take Geb, because I don't think they will. I think the Bolts would likely pick Cthulhu, given it the opportunity with his first selection.
I agree that it isn't the Geb. I think I maybe still hedge my bets towards the Morrigan as that first pick selection, because I think that is very core to the strategy of the Titans, but Aphrodite Cthulhu together, still incredibly annoying to deal with, so you might be onto something here. But although we are in different pick positions, some parts of the bans will remain the same. Set taken off the table, the Bolts continue to say, hey, Cyclone Spin, play a Hunter, man. Just do it.
Just do it. It may have to if things go the same way. And the Titans actually going to top ban the Geb.
Interesting.
This time around. That is not what I necessarily expected. And the Bolts ban the Morrigan.
Huh.
So things getting a little weird.
Yeah, the thick is plotted,
Yeah.
certainly. But this means that we are probably primed for a much more standard Smite match, a standard meta here, as a lot of these pieces have been taken away. But there still are some very high priority Guardians available. Sylvanas and Khepri still out there. I was going to say Yemoja, but the Titans beat me to the punch by banning it out in that second spot. Or you could even see them try and kind of allocate some of that pressure towards the jungle. Some of these high priority picks still available there as well.
Yeah, it was a lot of Guardian bans last time. Terra, Yemoja, and Artio all were banned. This time, Terra open and Artio as well, and they won't be able to ban both, as Odin is the final ban there for the Bolts, as they banned these 3, except for it was Artio instead of the Morrigan for their bans in game 1. It is another Terra ban once again by the Tartarus Titans, so they keep their bans fairly the same, except changing out Serket for Geb in their banning phase. But Cthulhu open, and I was going to say,
Oh, wow.
the Morrigan's off the table, the Geb's off the table, the 2 picks that we were talking about, what the Titans may take top overall last time. Why not just take this Cthulhu?
Yeah, and you don't have to go towards those priority Guardians, because it's a very unlikely world where the Titans take both Sylvanas and Khepri, so the Bolts should be able to pick up whichever one the Titans do not elect to take themselves. I wouldn't be surprised if we see the Titans try and strip away the Serket from Lasbra here, considering they allocated a ban towards it in the last match. I think that the Bolts very clearly have been looking for that pick recently, but Nike, first pick overall, good flex potential, could head over into the jungle, soul lane as well, and just general survivability helps out with that dive.
Same matchup that Benji played last time around, and this is the first adjustment. Camazot's top 2 don't have that same flex potential with picking it alongside the Nike, but when Lasbra played that well on it, when you know Layers has this in his God pool, I think I like this top 2 here for the Titans.
And this does put the Titans in a position where if they want to, they could stick Paul on that Aphrodite yet again, and you'll have 2 great connect targets. Camazots can dive very easily throughout just about every portion of the game, as can Nike, so could help out a fair bit here, especially as you highlighted earlier. It's a god that does not feel a lot of Cthulhu's threat. That Descent into Madness does not affect Aphrodite on the same level playing field as it does a lot of these other mid-mages. So what's the response from the Bolts? I think we are in a position where we could see maybe Artio head over to the support role. I think it's only really been PBM taking that one. Instead, it is the Erlang Shen locked in, likely headed for Lasbra inside of the jungle, and it is going to match up some of that pressure that Camazots brings.
This was a ban by the Bolts last game, so it makes sense that they want to prioritize it with their previous game's jungler locked in by the opposition. In this spot last time around, they picked the mid laner. They had Cthulhu, Camazots, and the Morrigan. Those were the top 3 for the Bolts. The Morrigan no longer an option for Venenu this time around, but Raijin is open, Tiamat is open. They want to go that direction, but they will lock in their support, and it is Sylvanas this time around for Jake.
That's a lot of sustain inside of your team fight. You've already got a great front line for the Olympus Bolts. Cthulhu and Descent into Madness going to give you team-wide heals throughout the entirety of an engagement. Sylvanas as well, giving you protections and healing from those wisps. Erlang Shen with a 9 turns blessing, going to keep himself up, or keep himself sustained throughout this one. As Zhang Kui locked in, the Tartarus Titans, there's the curveball. These guys refuse to play standard Smite. They want to do something a little bit different, and let's talk about team fight. We were just highlighting how much the Bolts have insofar as elongated engagements. Now, the Tartarus Titans say, all right, you can spread out your healing. I don't care. I've got damage for everybody. Zhang Kui, one of the masters of AoE.
And can provide a lot of that anti-heal across the team fight. Another god that doesn't really get as stressed about the Cthulhu on the other side, but also doesn't pressure them as much, though I think Zhang puts significantly more pressure on Cthulhu than someone like Aphrodite would.
I agree. You're doing a lot more damage output. He does have surprising bursts, despite the fact that he is generally going to be a god that is applying his damage evenly throughout an engagement. If he uses his entire kit on Cthulhu, could probably put a good deal of damage out. And, well, a slow always feels good when you're dealing with Erlang Shen, someone who has to get in your face to deal that melee damage. The card toss from Zhang Kui going to make sure that he struggles a little bit more so. On the other side, bans roll out through phase 2. Kepri removed by the bolts, and it's going to be Scotty and Aphrodite taken off the table by the Titans. The Titans say, hey, you've been stealing our style? Well, you can't have this piece.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we would like this here, so we're going to make sure that you don't like it in this situation as a couple of support bans come through. Ganesh banned, somewhat surprisingly, and by somewhat I mean pretty surprisingly in my opinion. This has not looked good for Aurora or for anyone else whenever they lock it in, but the Bolts aside, they don't want to play it anyways, maybe tossing the Titans a bone. But I do love the Kepri ban by the Bolts. I think that combo of Zhang Kui Kepri can be hard to deal with.
Yeah, just the Scarab's Blessing just allows Zhang Kui to press his 4 key and then hold down W, like set your fan down on the W key, and that's essentially playing the game for you after that, as long as you've got that safety net. So, Tartarus Titan's going to have to look a little bit deeper into their god pools for supports, and this is something we've seen banned away from Aurora pretty consistently. I'm sure he's just fine being allowed to play his Ares.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised, though, they pick it here. Aren't you, Mifflin? I mean, clearly the Titans want to give Cyclone the counter pick. They wanted to do the same last game. They bottom picked his pick, but, of course, in the first pick position, Barracuda was able to get the 10th. Clearly, they are trying to get Cyclone these counter matchups, and you pick the Ares when maybe you could have asked the Bolts to pick some more gods that Ares would have gone well against.
Agreed. As of now, you've at least got some pool potential under Erlang Shen. 9 turns Blessing does not afford you any CC immunity, but will give you a burst heal post-CC. Sylvanas and Cthulhu, you're not worried about it. Tiamat doesn't really have the inherent CC immunity except inside of that melee stance, so maybe if you're able to be a little bit cheeky with these pools, Ares could find her. But I agree. You could have waited on the Ares, but it is very clear that the Tartarus Titans recently have been playing through Cyclone Spin. So I think it's just fine to let him get his in the last pick.
Chernobog is the pick here for Barracuda, and this is something that kind of hard to counter pick. Also very good against the Ares because you could actually go into the wall and not get pulled without having to use your purification beads. But of course also has a dash, so you know it
15-second cripple.
Yeah, it's pretty good cripple there from the Ares either way. Interesting that the Titans have left this pick now for Cyclone Spin. He's played Set and Bakasura recently, and he goes back to this Bakasura. Yeah, I feel the same way. I'm surprised.
Yeah, look, I tried pretty hard to defend Bakasura in the last game. It didn't do poorly in lane by any means, but it didn't impress inside of the team fight phase. This time around, he does have some decent targets. You already highlighted Chernobog has a dash, Tiamat has a dash. Tiamat's actually doubling as her transform. Regurgitate can be able to stop those, as will Ares' chains, but I don't love Bakasura's odds in a 1v1 up against Erlang Shen inside the jungle in these late game team fights, which means that who is he really trying to 1v1? Probably this Chernobog, who could just head up into the air pretty quickly and just get himself out of dodge. I think the Tartarus Titans have shown that they don't love playing with hunters, but there's a reason everybody else in the league does.
Yeah, I mean, it's against the Cthulhu again, and clearly they feel like this has to be a fairly good matchup, right? Why else would they go back?
It's fine in the
twice in a
Cthulhu.
row? So maybe they feel like they can make it work. I mean, the Titans this time around, their team fight is much better than it was last game. I mean, you've got the AoE from Zhang, you've got the AoE from Baka now, you've got Ares. You've got better team fighting tools, I would say, than they did in their Game 1 composition, but I just don't know that they're able to remedy those same problems that they had in Game 1 because they still have some weaknesses.
And their early game is going to struggle. Ares hits his power spike at level 3, which is pretty early in the game, but even then, if you fall a level behind, Ares is very easy to lock down. You're only peeling yourself with the damage and the slow from chains, which means that gods like Erlang Shen, if that chain doesn't hit home, you're going to probably fall down pretty quickly. Zhang Kui as well. You're really only self-peeling with that stun throughout the early game, so if Erlang Shen is able to close gap there, could be an opening for the Olympus Bolts on the other side. A lot is riding on this Bakasura. We've seen it locked in twice now. It has to perform here.
Has to perform here. I mean, the death ball is certainly the call for the Tartarus Titans, but with how much sustain is on the other side, those types of compositions usually struggle against healing and AoE protections, which is exactly what the Bolts have.
Agreed. And, well, I mean, you could even just go like Heavenly Sprint on the side of the Olympus Bolts, and all of a sudden Jean Kui becomes a lot harder to execute on. You need to be in a decent range to apply the damage from your ultimate. Regurgitate becomes essentially a non-factor. You're out of the slow and generally outrunning the Bakasura, so the Olympus Bolts have that option ahead of them as well. And you already highlighted the amount of sustain they have inside of these late-game team fights. I think the Tartarus Titans have got an uphill battle here.
I think so too, but clearly going with this sort of strategy. Remember, this is important, trying to secure that top 2 seed heading into the group stages. We'll see if they can bounce back and force a Game 3. It's Dave and Gore bringing you the action.
The Olympus Bolts have come out fierce today. Game number 1, somewhat quick up against the Tartarus Titans. And Gore, there are some changes in this draft for the Tartarus Titans, but a lot of their mindset has remained the same, hasn't it? You stick with the Bakasura for Cyclone Spin. I think the big pivot is you had Aphrodite for Paul, which felt like almost a semi-Aegis for Cyclone Spin or whatever target you wanted to throw the Undying Love onto. You're swapping it out for a Jean Kui, which has seen middling success so far this year.
It's this really weird balance of Paul can do more now, but it strips away some of the potential from anybody else. Layers on Camisats is going to be a little more survivable. It's Cyclone Spin that should be worried.
Oh my god. All right.
They
All right,
almost got
Cyclone
him.
Spin, he walks out a little bit lower than he thought he might be after the first wave had crashed on his side of the map. And this is just so threatening. I mean, awesome Jake. You get a root, you get a pull, and you're going to get a lot of the damage off onto Aurora. Sprint used by awesome Jake. My goodness, this lane is just obnoxious to deal with. Gore, I mean, Sylvanas, just such a happy, Healy type guy, but he is hell-bent on finding pressure in this lane.
I mean, yeah, it's exactly what you said, right? Roots into pulls. The damage output that he has, granted, not a lot, but with lane pressure, look, Chernobog's going to be doing just fine on his own, but now you've got these AoE autos from your support that's going to be assisting you. I mean, they're going to be able to sit over there aggressively the entire time they want to, and there's not much you can do about it. Bakasura Ares might start to come online around level 5. We might see some fight back, but otherwise, I expect a lot of this.
All right, good news. Sustain there for Aurora and Cyclone Spin. Plenty of health potions. Have to top off those health bars. Lasbro was here, channeled the back, I believe just canceled the back. Wave pushing out a little bit further. No ward coverage on this side of the map for the Tartarus Titans, but it's no surprise to see Lasbro rotating to the left side of the map this early on. Layers is over in mid, red buff about to spawn. Aurora takes a lot of damage here, and so it's going to be Lasbro versus Paul over by the red buff, but Lasbro hasn't been farming for the last little bit of time. Layers up and over the wall, and Lasbro takes a questionable fight. First blood to the Titans.
Yeah, that's just aggressive positioning getting punished the way that it should be, right? Layers and Paul collapse in, Layers with a good rotation to make sure that they catch up to Lasbro. But, you know, he stays maybe a little too aggressively. I mean, you had highlighted he wasn't farming. He's still level 2 compared to 4 for Layers. He sat at the duo lane for too long, didn't get a purple buff, didn't get the red buff, got a small Harpy next to the Gold Fury pit. It's just a weird overcommit from Lasbro. Something that's manageable, although he's definitely going to have a little bit more of a lapse here in the early game than maybe what we could expect out of the year-long Shen. But he's also in this weird position where no matter what, the Bolts team scaling is just so ridiculous into the late game that it's going to be such a convoluted mess, something difficult to overcome for the Titans, even if Layers is down, or Lasbro is down 1 to 2 levels.
And Gore, what might end up being wildly impactful here in this matchup, not only the range discrepancy that we've talked about, Cyclone Spin jumps on out of the root there, the rotation potential of Barracuda in this matchup as well.
Yes.
You know, it's one thing you have a Hunter in a fight versus an auto-attack-centric assassin on the other side. I'll hold this thought as Lasbro makes his way to the right side. Pin just shy of connecting onto Benji. Sentinel of Zeus does get used, so he's getting the ultimate out of the Nike. But Gore, it's one thing having this range differential, Cyclone Spin versus Barracuda, but now you've got the rotation potential from Barra, and so Cyclone Spin, I mean, really got to be on top of things when it comes to split pushing, when to rotate in, where to be at what given time. And that's maybe the case of any Hunter without a global ultimate, but doubly so here in this game, advantage-wise for the Olympus Bolts.
And I think worth mentioning one more time and just doubling down on, Cyclone Spin has Blink early on, so he's only going to have beads, presumably later, or Aegis. So he's already easily caught out because he doesn't have that CC immunity. But when you start to stack things on top of themselves, what he has going for him, outside of all these detriments we've highlighted, is that he kills people really quickly. He is going to be able to find a good moment in the fight, and he should be able to burn down 1 to 2 targets.
Gore used his blink, Cyclone Spin did, to get over by the purple buff. Lasbro rotates in. Last little guy is chilling out there. And so at least able to get the purple. Cyclone Spin probably calls that worth. There's maybe not many moments now, given the way that this lane has gone, where Cyclone is going to want to blink in to the Olympus Bolt, and all the pressure has been mounting against him. And so blink for purple buff may be something that Cyclone Spin would end up calling worth. I do think it's worth analyzing, though, Gore, the difference for Awesome Jake here in this game, because the Ymir provided just such immense lockdown. Slayer's chasing down Venenu. Ven had the chance, I was going to say, to get beneath his tier 1 tower, chooses to go to the right and then bounce back underneath the mid lane here. But the Ymir versus the Sylvanas, Gore, I think could provide some differences here in this game, and we're not going to get the chance to talk about it because Lasbra jumped on yet again, healing just on the other side. So Lasbra back to full HP. Haddix is gone big here, and the Tartarus Titans retreating.
There's
Here
Barra.
comes Barra from the left side of the map, and my God, the damage huge. The Olympus Bolt's running down the Titans. It's a long-winded jungle fight here, but Venenu finally notches a kill.
And Layers has no mana to work with. Nobody else is following Venenu. They've all gone to the other side of the jungle.
Stun.
Look, if they had the follow-up, I think they could have gotten another kill there, potentially on the Layers. But it's still a good fight, and it showcases maybe a little bit of everything we've been talking about for the Bolts. They've got good peel for each other, good survivability, a lot of sustain. The person who gets the lowest in all of that is Haddix, and Cthulhu is only going to get stronger. And you get that rotation from Barra. It just feels like they got everything.
Paul in trouble here. Awesome Jake is making his way to the mid lane. Pin no good, and that likely would have killed off Paul. Paul did not have beads. So just shy of another kill for the Olympus Bolts was Lasbra there on that pin. But fantastic to answer back an early kill for Layers with one onto Venenu on this Tiamat. You get Chronos Pendant finished off. You're able to get the tier 1 tiny trinket and a 1-level lead there in mid. You know, a pick that's going to scale anyway, Gore, but making life easier for yourself if you're the Bolts. Fantastic route in the first few minutes.
Plus, something you don't get to see too often, you know, any game sub 10 minutes, is everybody on the Bolts having assist on that single kill, right? Like, it's something that
it's not often.
Isn't necessarily worth going in depth on, but it's something that's rare, or at least it feels it. And it showcases again how good the Bolts teamfight can be. But this is where Cyclone can shine.
We have seen this plenty of times from Cyclone Spin.
Never
Ultimate
mind.
down, but in and out of the wall goes Barracuda. And so that's actually, Gore, something semi-impactful that might end up countering out that ultimate from Cyclone Spin as this game goes on, because Barra on the Izanami, remember, was pushed back, couldn't confirm his own purple buff. Cyclone Spin was invading on cooldown, and purple buff dropped down by either Lasbra or Barra. It's there. Might not be able to go pick it up. But once the Tartarus Titans back away, Barra will, in fact, get his own purple buff.
Feels good, right? You get the blink, you get the ult, you burn from Cyclone Spin, you on top of all of that did not have to use your beads in any of these engagements, and so far you are feeling perfectly fine. You even managed to keep a hold of your buff and a little bit of that farm. Yeah, there's a level discrepancy. You've got 2 levels for Aurora right now, 1 level for Cyclone Spin. You're probably feeling that a little bit, especially in these fights, but
Yep.
Barra's playing a slow roll anyway. I mean, he's already gone for Transcendence early on, so it's not like he's jumping into the fights and expected to be this crazy hyper carry at level 8. He is waiting and playing the long con here. And that's the benefit. I mean, you had highlighted it, but this entire team comp just does so much in the late game, and it dies so little in the early game that there's not a lot of wiggle room for the Titans to work with here. I mean, they've still got now just a little over that first blood bounty's worth of gold, but in terms of a lead, they haven't been able to amass as much as you would really want, especially for this kind of comp. And it worries me a little bit. You know, you had mentioned lacking the Ymir, like Zhonghui, Ares, and Bakasura, all susceptible to things like the wall. But I think Jake is going to still have a whale of a time locking people down here, especially with the pulls that he's going to be able to have. There's only 1 pair of beads on the other side. CC is going to stick well for the Bolts.
Desk mentioned Sprint maybe being a valuable relic pickup for Awesome Jake. He has gone that route. And I do think, Gore, the relic choice for Aurora worth looking at here. So Med is the option for this Ares. And I think that lends itself to this next conversation where we're 9 minutes in. We haven't necessarily been fighting all over the place. Haven't seen the Ares ultimate really get used. And I think that could be an interesting pivot point here in this game where that second relic choice goes for Aurora. Because if you don't have Blink on Ares, you've got to just walk in, try to find the pull against 3 sets of beads that Lasbra, Ven, and Barracuda all have. And then, of course, Haddix with his ultimate can kind of counter out the pull there from Aurora. So maybe that's why you see a bit of a slower paced early game out of this Ares. You go med first just to survive the lane, and then maybe Blink comes later.
And admittedly, Blink would be immensely helpful. I mean, you had highlighted it. Like, you have to walk in, which, one, is way easier said than done in a normal composition. But I see Sylvanas who can root you. I see Lasbra who can pin you or taunt you, depending on the follow-up they have, as well as Venenu who can root you. Things like that are going to cause a lot of trouble for the Titans, and specifically for Aurora if he was trying to close that gap. I won't be surprised if we don't see much of him for the next few minutes at all.
Yep. So Aurora with a slower pace start, but at least maintaining a bit of a lead over Awesome Jake. Beads get used by Paul just a moment ago. A pull from Jake sends its way, I think, next to Paul. The ball kind of blocked me out there. At any rate, what's important is that the beads are now gone on the Zhonghui. Tartarus Titans not worried about it, though, Gormizer. Gold Fury started up for the Titans. What's the rotation from the Bolts look like? To the right side of the map. They're going to get the Pyromancer, and it looks like a quiet, uncontested Gold Fury for one side, and then a Pyromancer with a very low Lasbra for the other.
Second verse, mostly similar to the first. Not the exact same, right? We had a Pyromancer, then Fury into a second Pyro from the Bolts last game. But the same kind of call. Hey, you know what? We're not going to make it in time. We're not going to fight that. Who cares? Let them have it. They're going to get a little bit of gold. Ultimately, they're the same amount ahead now as they were prior to that. They're still going to get the Pyromancer. And it's something that the Bolts feel very safe calling early on each time. And I think, again, rightly so here. I mean, you've mentioned it. Zhonghui hasn't had the most stellar win-loss this year. He's been doing way better in Phase 3 than all of the other year, or the rest of the year combined. But still hasn't been doing too hot, so he is already kind of a little bit of a dampener. And this Bakasura felt like it was very easy to manage last game around, that I don't think the Bolts are as worried about it as they could be. And so the Titans, even with a nice little early gold lead, have a lot of room to make up for here. Especially since Zhonghui, we see a stacking item, the Warlock Staff immediately. Paul's going to be tanky, but he's not going to have that damage early on.
That's a good pull in from Awesome Jake. Remember, Paul didn't have those beads. It's pulled and ult and pin all used onto Paul. Aurora doesn't need to walk in. When they walk into Aurora, Awesome Jake pulled right back with Barracuda with the ult back to the mid lane. The first fight, the first kill in this skirmish to the Tartarus Titans, and that is the eject button pressed by the Olympus Bolts. They rotate in and force, but come up empty-handed.
Yeah, I think if Benji is able to get there a little sooner, not Benji, Haddix is able to get there a little sooner, then we potentially see a much bigger fight from the Bolts. But once Bear landed, again, you know, he just finished stacking his Transcendence. You can recognize, I'm not hitting as hard as I need to right now. There's no way this fight's going to go the way we want it to. Layers did have to use his ult, but still has a lot of damage. They all had their blinks. I like the call to fall back there. You lose your support. Unfortunate for Jake, but you are making a much better call by not losing anybody else. And it goes to show what the Titans have to offer. That's something I think that has been easily glanced over because the Bolts have a very solid draft. Aurora into Paul into Layers damage, just the core 3v3 for the Titans, is a lot to handle. And Paul has a lot of survivability built into Zhonghui's kit and his build.
He's going to need that survivability, Paul has the beads, but pull is not there from Awesome Jake, and so Paul able to waltz on out. You're right, Gor. Zhonghui, difficult to deal with, to say the least. Just hasn't seen continued success across the league. But might synergize well with the way that the Titans want to play out the rest of this game.
Honestly, I think that this is the best point in the game for the Titans right now. You've got beads that are going to be on long cooldown. Admittedly, only 2 available right now for the Bolts. That opens up a lot of opportunities for Aurora. He's soon to be level 12, so we might get to see the Blink come online for him, and that'll really enable them. But Zhonghui, with the Divine Ruin and the Warlock Staff, should be hitting harder than what Venenu is able to accomplish right now. With a little more time, this Tiamat's going to not only match, but exceed the amounts of damage that we want to see out of a god just in general. And so I think that we're going to have that laying in wait. The Bolts, 20 minutes into the game, absolutely able to pincer and deal with the Titans. But right now, this is the Titans' room to work with.
Wow, there is no Fury. I thought we might be fighting. This is aggressive from Aurora, walking into the Olympus Bolt side of the jungle. But that pressure and not knowing where the rest of the Titans are enough to make the Bolts back off just a little bit. Layers is taking a little bit of damage here in the mid lane. Benji is way behind the Olympus Bolts here. If the Bolts extend out further into the mid lane, could be an easy Sentinel of Zeus in. what really is impactful here, Gore, is that Lasbra, unfortunately, is going to walk in to an empty side of the jungle. And that doesn't feel great when you're one level down against Layers. And this Camazotz, you know, it's been quiet since the first couple of kills, but Layers has been impactful in the first bloods and in the early game for the Tartarus Titans, continues that trend. Now it's Jotun's, Brawler's Beat Stick, Serrated Edge as well. We haven't seen the damage in a little while, but should be some impactful damage coming out of the jungle here for the Tartarus Titans. Jake thought he had found an engage, and it's anything but. Instead, it's an engage on to the Sylvanas. Layers swoops through with the bat out of hell. Barracuda swoops in with his ultimate as well. That is a lot of burst damage onto Layers, who does not have any more escape, and Venenu calls him on it. A big kill back to the Bolts right around the time the Fury's going to spawn.
Yeah, Oni Fury's right here, but you can see Lasbra having to back off. Jake's relatively low, so I think they're going to have to hit the pause button, but Paul might get caught out here. Benji's making a rotation.
Benji is making something. I mean, he's pushing out a wave from on the right side of the map before he heads back. Haddix dashes in. Paul, big burst of damage onto the Zhonghui, who does not have his ultimate any further. Chains out from Aurora. Aurora does, in fact, have his ultimate. Bit of a split engagement here, Gore. Luckily, the Titans, though, in an odd-numbered situation, back away.
All right, I got two things. One, if I call Haddix Benji one more time, I'm going to get on myself. I did it while we were talking to Myth between games, and for some reason that stuck. But this is the wild thing.
What is happening
There was a 2-on-1 engage. It was Lasbra and Jake versus Benji by the right-hand Phoenix of all places. And Benji seems to have won. I mean, Lasbra's forced to run away, tail tucked between his legs. That is impressive from the Nike. And what felt like it was going to be a huge benefit for the Bolts has now turned into what I thought was going to be some pressure from the Titans. They had the Oni Fury right there in their laps, and yet they're going to back off. Again, probably a smarter call. You do have Haddix on the left-hand side, and with the lack of ward coverage, I mean, look how many blue wards there are. The Bolts should know everything that's going on in this left side jungle. Any important fights, any important groupings from the Titans will get caught before the Titans are able to get anything online. So that's a good opening position for him. Of course, Jake is doing all of this dancing on a sentry ward. And that's what's going to make the big difference right now. This vision changing, especially as I see some of these wards despawning for the Bolts. It's going to make things a lot more beneficial for the Titans. That Oni Fury is really getting a lot of heavy weight. Last game, this was a Primal. That meant very little compared to what this could do in terms of pressure.
Lasbra needs the heal here. It is a small heal. Gets the shielding as well. Playing with thin margins, but able to get the Pyromancer nonetheless. And I think that's a pretty obvious reaction here. Lasbra uses his ult. We're not trying to fight for the Oni Fury. Jake didn't get the memo. He'll have to use the sprint. Cyclone Spin tosses out the slow, and awesome Jake jumped on. And so it is Oni Fury plus kill and trade for Pyromancer. Titans feeling just fine with that trade, feeling just fine, Gore, with a 3,500 gold lead they've built up 17 minutes in.
It's something that's fun to think about, because in theory, Bakasura minions are their own version of a wall, and right there we saw it block off Jake and stop him from getting anything done. This has been a great last 5 minutes from the Titans, really using their strengths to their level. But now you're starting to see, I think, some of the fight back. There hasn't been a big grouping from the Bolts. They've always been scattered. And right now the Titans, especially traveling as 4, this close-knit death ball comp is so far exceeding in finding the picks. I mean, the Bolts are playing pretty much right into the Titans' hands.
Which is interesting, Gore, considering that you have Barracuda and you have the ultimate to rotate into those fights. We saw some early uses of it, some great. Some have fallen a little bit flat, but that's still something to look out for as the game goes on. Kind of Barra being able to match out Cyclone Spin's positioning and then out-rotate into some of those fights. Venenu still feels like the backbone of this Olympus Bolts composition right now.
Yeah.
It's a shell used by Awesome Jake. The most even one on the map right now is Venenu, who's got 2 kills but an even level lead with Paul. Everyone else feels like they're just a little bit behind. And I think, Gore, as long as you're getting Benji and Layers involved in these fights, the Titans should feel fine given the lead that they've got over their counterparts.
It is one of those weird moments where, like you said, you know, you get your right-hand side of the map involved in these fights. You should feel good about it. Layers has been putting in work compared to what we've seen out of Lasbra this game. Lasbra, that little bit of an early lane gank has been punishing him severely. His damage numbers are,
wow.
yeah, his net worth is tanked in comparison, almost to the 2K mark. I mean, he is definitely feeling it, and all of it stems from just a slight bit of missed farm early on, but since then, it has been good play from Layers. I think realistically, this is also the shakiest that you could be going into a 20-minute mark for the Titans. This is a good lead for them. They're up 5K gold. They've got the experience lead, as you would highlight it, in several of their roles. It feels like Venenu right now is the only thing keeping the ship afloat. But at the same time, level 20 and 20 plus minutes in is where I want to see most of these gods for the Olympus Bolts.
That's a decent bit of damage connecting onto Barracuda. Jake uses ultimate here in mid. Benji shrugs it off. Paul gladly takes the knock-up. The Sylvanas score did something we raised a conversation about earlier on in the game. Has felt less impactful than the Ymir did. Benji around the backside of Haddix and Venenu. Barracuda's got his ult, so watch out for the Chernobog rotating into this fight. Underneath the mid lane tier 1 tower goes Barra. Ben with the Aegis stays alive. Nice taunt in, but Layers jumps on over it. Venenu survives. Barracuda turns around the kill, and now Haddix can press down on the gas pedal. A nice pull in from Awesome Jake. Puts Benji right back into the fray. This could be big from Aurora, but it only gets the Sylvanas pulled back in.
And now you get to see the damage numbers. Barra finished off the win team, and they're going back in.
Lasma right back in. Oh, the knockup's big. On to 2 members of the Titans. Barracuda, full HP, chasing down the Titans. Cyclone's been able to turn it around, though. Haddix will try to lock in a couple underneath the tier 1 tower. Go the Titans. It's a 2-for-1 trade. But the Olympus Bolts get a tower in tow.
And honestly, they might be able to, should be able to push this a little further. They've got enough tanks, enough damage to cause a little bit of trouble. You can see just off the mark, Benji can't really get as aggressive as he wants. There's some absorbs. No spectral armors online. Barra has the Wind Demon, and his damage makes a huge difference. Plus, let's throw it out there. Some of the most insane jukes between Lasma, Vin, and Barra, kiting Layers under that tier 1 and making sure that Vin could get out alive was absolutely nuts. Yeah, you still lose Layers, but let's face it, Layers isn't worth so much right now. We were just talking about it. He's 2k gold down compared to where Layers is. 2-for-1 trade is absolutely worthwhile.
Lasma's down.
And that's what if I do it again, I'm flipping. There are too many names that going on in this game. Well, this has opened up an interesting point. I didn't think this was going to start for either of these teams.
And it did. Tartarus Titans start up FG. Haddix is close by, immediately pushed back by Benji. And they just do it, Gore. There were 3 members of the Titans on it. And that is massive, because that's a fight that the Olympus Bolts come back in the mid lane. They come away with it with an advantage. They get 2 towers. Gold swings back up in their favor. We're talking 4K a moment ago. Now we're talking 1.5K. Right back for the Tartarus Titans with this FG buff in their back pocket. Great call from the Titans to give themselves a big advantage for the next 3.5 minutes here in this game. But Gore, that is not going to slow down the Bolts.
What a pull!
Layers. Goodbye, Camazot's Aurora. Gonna get taunted right back through as well. Too much CC.
He's dead.
And the chains will not pull today. Benji left running. And what a call by the Bolts to catch the Titans by surprise.
I mean, such a good pick. Look, that's mirror to game number 1. Exactly what helps the Bolts win that, even without a Fire Giant, right? It's just getting these picks in the jungle, and it's good showcase, once again, when beads are down, what the Sylvanas can do. A great pull, and the damage numbers that they're able to put out. Benji might just get caught out here. Luckily, it's, Nike still has is able to disengage. But I think they're showcasing a lot of the strengths. I was going to highlight the Bolts' defense. I was going to say, you know what? I think they can stand around a tier 2, no problem, because this is a good comp for that kind of thing. They've got a lot of control and a lot to limit the Titans in terms of their mobility. But now they've stepped beyond and further into that in controlling fights around their own tier 2 on the Titans side and making sure that they feel awkward. I mean, Benji and Cyclone is something to worry about, but this is just a great set of plays from the Bolts to really limit this Fire Giant.
You know what they say about a good defense score, or the best defense? A good offense. And that's what the Olympus Bolts bring out here. Nice pull from Jake. A couple of the pulls of this game, admittedly, have gone wide, haven't connected. A couple kills maybe dropped. That one hits its mark. Layers dies with beads up. The chain CC, the important thing to look at there. It all piles onto the Camazots. Still Fire Giant on a few key members of the Tartarus Titans in the solo mid. And Hunter, I guess, but I'll call it Cyclone Spin on ADC there. Still has the FG buff. That means there is still push pressure from the Tartarus Titans. They'll knock down a tier 1 in mid and get the Pyromancer.
And you had highlighted this earlier. First off, Jake, that's 2 wide in a row, right? But that's the point, right? When we get to see this pick, if you aren't hitting all of them, it doesn't matter because the ones that you do hit are very impactful. This is a good defense position for the Bolts. I think they can hold on to this, especially knowing that Haddix has ult. This Cthulhu changes the game in terms of team fights. And not having FG for Layers, having it on Cyclone but not having the range, really opens up an easy defense to try and hold all of these tower lines across the map. And they only have a minute left to burn. I mean, that is a long time to have to deal with pressure from the Titans. But they've limited the gold lead back down to 1,100. It's not anywhere near as thick a lead as the Titans would like. I mean, as far as we were talking about it, in game number 1, how well played an FG power play can be.
Yep.
This is not necessarily the polar opposite, but this definitely does take a huge chunk of wind out of your sails. You do not feel like you have the momentum you should for a pick like this.
Haddix will use his ultimate. Seems like a very calculated trade there from Aurora. I mean, that's not
that's an easy trade.
A mechanical play. He said, there is a Cthulhu in front of me. I want to use my ultimate in exchange for his ultimate. Lasbro wishes he had his ultimate still. Bat out of health, swoops through, and Layers makes no mistake about it this time. Venenu might be caught out here as well, but a rotation in from the rest of the Olympus. Bolts could return a kill. Onto Aurora with the Ares will live on. Venenu knocks himself backwards. Benji lurches himself forward, and the Tartarus Titans able to find a couple of kills. Great knockup from us and Jake, but Barracuda's got a kite. Back into the Titan room, pull onto Cyclone Spin. Keeps things interesting.
And they do still get that tier 2, and they have some pressure, but without Cyclone Spin, I don't know that you want to put any pressure. I actually like this. Keep going. Haddix is going to be able to create a zone. Jake should be able to set this up. Fight back.
All eyes got to be on Barra. Maybe they should be on Jake. It's a pull onto Benji. Barracuda will make us raise our eyebrows for a moment, but we can take a deep breath. Tier 2 missing in mid. And I think the bolt score, that turnaround kill into Cyclone Spin, and a massive pull from Jake. If we're going to call out the misses, we got to call out the hits. That is huge in kind of turning around what could have been for the Tartarus Titans there. I mean, if you're Laz and Ven, you're thinking, damn, I've just given up the Phoenix, maybe the game. The rest of the bolt's able to kite on back, shows you the power of the Cthulhu. And things still alive here for both teams going into the next FG.
Yeah, it's one of those things. You get to see a good play from Layers, great play from Benji. All of that stems from Aurora. You had called it, I see Cthulhu in front of me. I'm going to drop my ult because who cares? I'm Ares. I'm either going to get beads or I'm going to pull somebody. And I'm going to force this Cthulhu ult, this huge team fight changer, and at least open up the opportunity for us to get something. I mean, up to this point, they got what, a bunch of tier 1s? That's finally a map state that they can at least have an exposed Phoenix, feel confident in, despite the fact that the gold lead isn't so heavily in their favor. And that opens up that opportunity. The bolts then separate in a very weird way. Lasbra and Vin left to defend in mid, and that was just a recipe for disaster. And they're very fortunate that Jake is good at hitting those pulls. He hit 2 in a row that were very confident. 1 able to kill off Cyclone Spin, 1 able to put Benji in an awkward spot. But since Benji and these frontliners on the side of the Titans are the ones that have got my focus right now, I have to highlight that he just finished the Spectral Armor. It was already damn near impossible for Bear to kill him 10 seconds ago, 30 seconds ago, let alone now that he's got extra protection against this build. And luckily, Barra hasn't gone so heavily into it. You're going to have that reduced crit chance by 60%. It's a huge chunk, but with Dominance online, with the Aussie online, the crits aren't as heavy-handed in this build just yet. Now that he's started what I'm going to assume is going to end up being a Deathbringer, that's when you're going to be missing a little bit. Ultimately, maybe balancing out kind of with the Spectral, but not by the means that it's going to end up helping Barra take on just Benji.
And it's a very specific matchup there, though, where Benji's the one on Barra. Those crits won't hit, but if Barra continues scrapping out a couple members of the Titans, those crits will still have full force with the body blocks from Haddix. Benji takes a lot more damage there. Layers, what are you doing, my friend? You blink in, and then you immediately have to bat out of hell. Right on out. Aurora holds onto his ultimate this time, but descending into madness is Haddix. Barracuda lets his ult go. Might transfer into the back line of this fight. He is in the back line fighting off with Benji. Spectral Armor, no problem. Cyclone Spin jumps away. Haddix puts him in the dirt, but it's a turnaround kill from Paul.
I mean, look at this. Paul is able to get so much damage done, but Barra's got so much health.
Oh, massive stun from Paul, but is it enough for the time? No, the Olympus bolts. They've got enough health and sustain to turn the fight around.
Layers goes from no health to full health. Aurora's going to try to stay alive here, but this feels like it's just doom and gloom.
Oh, Aurora will throw out the flames, but Barracuda will put him right on out. Killing spree for the Chernobog. And Barracuda's come alive here in game number 2. Fire Giant has spawned. It is 35 seconds at most, at most now, on the respawn timers here for the Tartarus Titans, but slow on the pull core are the bolts. Layers and Benji here to make things interesting.
They've got 15 seconds before anybody at the earliest is available here for the Titans, and they've got sustain. That's the real name of the game right now. That Sylvanas is making the plays for the bolts because they know that they have time to work with. They don't have to stress out. They don't have to pull the Fire Giant and risk it. In fact, if anything, now they're just guaranteeing that Lasbra can get it. And despite the fact that Lasbra's 1-4-6, and I'm going to go ahead and call it out, has not had a very stellar game on this Erlong ship. Has had really good pins, has had some really good taunts.
Benji jumps onto Venenu here. Fire Giant is low here.
Y'all gotta be careful.
Benji is still full HP. Layers bad out of hell. Benji, no, can't get it done, but Layers
They get Vin.
will snag a kill onto Venenu. Lasbra taunts through onto Benji.
Oh, what a kill.
Barracuda drops Layers in return. Benji pulled right back through by Awesome Jake. Cyclone Spin in on the respawn as well. So it's a 1-for-1 trade, but FG for the Bolts gives them the advantage.
Yeah, it feels like they had the mentality of let's save this for Lasbra, and then took a little too long to get things going for them. It opened up way too many opportunities for Benji and Layers, and yeah, Layers pays for it with his life, but killing off Vin there slows down the Bolts dramatically in comparison to where they were before. It does mean that we're going to be in a little bit of a pause. Yeah, there's going to be a Primal Fury for the other side, but they can spend some of the gold, 2,100, almost 2,200 there for Jake. And they also have to wait now for these relics. No beads, no Aegis available there for Barra. Feels a little more awkward to try and engage and fight with something like that, especially up against someone like Cyclone Spin, who 2-2-2, he's having a better game so far. I think they're going to have to slow roll it just a little bit. There's only one tower standing on the other side of the map anyway, so the Bolts don't have too much that they're worried about in those regards. Team fights have been going their way with Vin back on the menu and back on the map. That opens up a lot more opportunities. But the problem has been, and this is where things are going to get more complicated for the Bolts, the splits for them.
Yeah.
When they separate, Lasbra is not having enough of a game that I am confident in their capability. If I send Lasbra plus Vin over to the mid lane, I don't know that that 2v2 is going to be successful. I'm not that confident in it. I think you have to send them with someone like Haddix or Jake, and that separates your fight maybe too much. I think they have to go 5-on-5 on left here.
A tough game to say the least score for Lasbra. 1-4-7 on the year-long Shen. Layers was having a tough game. Both of the junglers were near the bottom of the damage charts just a little bit ago, but Layers has found some impact, finding some picks in these fights. When you're full build on a Camazotz, you got to nuke someone, right? You got to get in there, find some damage, and Layers, as a result, has shot up the damage charts a little bit. Still relatively low on the damage charts. Seen this trade before though, Core, but this time Haddix happy to use his ultimate where he's at because he has separated out this fight. Benji immediately has to leap away. The rest of the Bolts gathering up, surging forward down the left side of the map.
And I love this because it forces so much away from them. You get the Sentinel of Zeus and a Roar's ult. Yeah, Benji doesn't have his, but look how low Paul is.
Oh my god! Oh, Gore, he's dead, he's gone! Layers is able to turn things around though. Make it a 1-for-1 trade. Venenu sends some damage right back towards Aurora. You have to kite backwards now. If you're the Olympus Bolts, the Phoenix is gone. My god, that died fast. The Olympus Bolts got what they came for.
Barra did his one job, which was, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to kill the bird, and I'm going to get the hell out. I need to stay alive, and that is exactly what he does. They trade Paul for Lasbra. At this stage of the game, feels worthwhile. Again, Lasbra 2-5, you get exactly what you need out of him, and then you can utilize everything else that your team has available. They've got minions pushed up here as well in mid. Barra's alive, sustain is available for them, so they're not even lacking too much in health. The most they have to worry about is going to be Cyclone Spin. That ult just came back up, and look at his position. He's going for the backline.
Yep, Cyclone Spin not far away from Lasbra.
And he's got
on
crit.
the damage charge. He's found Barracuda, who has the beads, also has the Aegis, but he's also got a wall. That is at his disposal. Haddix halfway back to his ultimate, so you won't have that here. Cyclone Spin has got to walk away from the rest of this fight. So we'll calm down just for a moment as the Phoenix looked at yet again by the Olympus Bolts. Remember, the route back into this fight a lot longer for Lasbra, while the respawn back through from Paul will put him right on the doorstep of this fight a little bit quicker. So the Olympus Bolts, realizing that, will take a deep breath. We've got a minute and 20 seconds before the next respawn to the FG. You've gotten the left side Phoenix. The stage is set to end the game.
This is something I didn't think I was going to talk about a lot this game, but Barra's survivability has been, like, the key.
Yeah.
I think there are moments, especially now you look at it, the Wind Demon, alongside the Crusher, alongside the Deathbringer, there's a lot of damage behind every punch of Cyclone Spins. Every time he can get the bite, if he goes in the ult and he catches you off guard, it's going to be great. But if beads are available for Barra and he can just get rid of anything that's going to cripple him and dash into a wall, all of a sudden Cyclone Spin is, you know, up the river, no paddle to work with.
Whoa.
And all of a sudden, might get caught out in the jungle.
Up the river to say the absolute least here.
No.
Cyclone Spin walked down. 85 seconds on beads, 10 seconds on blink. Not that would have made any difference. And this is exactly how game one ended.
Yeah.
The Olympus Bolts were setting things up for the next FG. They get a pick, and then they push things in. But won't be the same ending, at least not yet. The Olympus Bolts get the pick on the Cyclone Spin, and if nothing else, makes this enhanced Fire Giant easier to take to then end the game.
I mean, this is one of those awkward moments where you have, it feels like so much to do with 30 seconds, no Cyclone Spin. And yet you can't really do it. You can only go for the Pyromancer or the FG, although a good pull. I mean, Jake's setting up beautifully. If they can kill off Aurora or kill off Benji here, that's a huge stagger kill for them, especially now that I see Layers joining the fray. There's a golden opportunity for the Bucks.
Are you going to push this advantage a little bit faster because Cyclone Spin is only 10 seconds away from respawning. Pyromancer there for the Bolts. Fire Giant grouped up on by a couple members of the Bolts. No surprise that Haddix is at the forefront of the conversation as the enhanced Fire Giant has begun. Pull is out from Aurora onto Haddix, who gladly takes the pull this time. Haddix didn't have a choice. His ultimate is still down. Benji walking forward into a pit of hellfire as he's forced into the Sentinel of Zeus and then the leap away. Will keep the Nike alive. Watch out for Layers, though. He's rounding this right-hand side.
Haddix almost has his ult back, though, so yes, he's low, but this is actually a good position for the Cthulhu. This could be a turnaround for the Bolts.
Could be a bait. Paul has committed onto Haddix, but Haddix has gone big here. But watch out, Layers is looking at the backline. He's walked right on in to the backline of the Olympus. Bolts. Layers has gotten finally a kill onto Lasbra. Haddix whittled away. He's low. He's got to send range damage out towards the Tartarus Titans. It's a fantastic looking fight for the Chaos team, who's been behind for the last 10 minutes of this game and suddenly find a big kill.
Sustain is going to be the name of the game, though. They still have Sylvanas. They still have capabilities to get back in this fight. And everyone's just a little low on the Titans. They started to heal up. This is a good chance for the Bolts to re-engage.
Where did Haddix come from? Blink is the answer. How the Olympus Bolts
Layers
are fighting at an odd number disadvantage. Benji gets the first. Barracuda's on Rampage, and he's got to go huge. He's half HP. And is able to get one onto Layers, and that is a massive loss. Aurora, Benji, Paul, the health bars.
Cyclone just
low here. It's a 3v3. Cyclone back to base. Sentinel of Zeus back up. Barracuda knocked against the wall by Benji. And Benji's got enough damage to chase this down, but the Aegis will buy Barracuda a little bit of time. Kills traded out on either side. Meyer from Haddix pulls things out. Aurora, no good with his ultimate here. Venenu has enough damage to turn this around. Haddix burns on down, then jumps forward. A double kill for the Tiamat. 3 alive across the map. 2 for the Titans, 1 for the Bolts.
Wild fight. I don't even know where to begin with that one, except for Cyclone Spin backs. Maybe is an overwhelming victory for the Titans if he's there. Look at that Phoenix on the left-hand side. It's alive.
Yeah.
Maybe not healthy, but it's alive, and that is exactly where they need it. You get an Oni Fury to get some of the pressure back across the lanes, and that is a good call from them, despite the fact that it ends up still being a 4-for-3 trade. Lasber goes down really early on in that, and unfortunately you get to see a lot of the similar problems that have been plaguing the Bolts so far in a lot of these team fights. You do get a kill finally onto Jake, which is good for the Titans here. Slowing down that sustain, but you're seeing so much of it. I mean, Lasbra is pure damage. He's getting kills or he's getting killed, and he is in no in-between as of right now.
Of the latter.
And so Layers is in a fun position where if he dives deep, Barra, depending on how the crits decide to fare that fight, is going to be able to come out alive. He's had to use his beads a few times, had to use his Aegis to stay alive in that one, and you get to see the really big beats from the front line, where specifically Benji is the biggest thorn, I think, in the side of the Bolts.
And Gore Barra undiversifying a little bit as far as damage sources. Sells off that Transcendence, still has Aussie and Dominance, but it is a late game Rage at this point for Barracuda. Still very effective against basically everyone but Benji, who has that Spectral armor. But definitely worth noting, that is a pivot Barracuda chose going into this next fight.
And honestly, considering how much damage he's been able to output and how big these crits have been for them, I mean, it's 28k. Yeah, he's trailing behind Benji and trailing behind Venenu, but they're Cthulhu and Tiamat. They're supposed to be up at the top as of right now. I'm actually really impressed with Benji and what he's been able to do on this Nike so far. The question is whether or not Cyclone's will be the difference maker.
Hence Fire Giant starts.
Oh no, they left it low.
Quickly, Fire Giant reset by the Tartarus Titans, but it's okay. The Bolts not looking at it, but they are. The Bolts are now looking at it. Benji waiting over the wall. Haddix separating out the fight. Fire Giant goes to the Bolts, but there's a sweep back through from Layers. Taunt is out from Lasbra. Sustain on the other side will keep the year-long Shen in the fray, but Benji jumps in. Haddix zoning out the back line of this fight. Cyclone Spin. What a pull. Smells Barracuda around the corner, searching for the Chernobog, the most important member of the Olympus Bolts you could get, but Haddix is the one on the menu, pulled in by Aurora, taken down, and now it's time for the Bolts to leave.
Barra has to be careful here, just shy of hitting Layers with a lot of those. Cyclone's gonna jump in!
Oh my god, he's got huge damage onto Barra, who immediately turns it back around. Have you overextended if your Cyclone Spin? Circle A if the answer is yes, and A is filled on in here. The Olympus Bolts make them pay, but it's a pullback through from Awesome Jake. Benji brought right back into the fray.
Sustained. Again, watch the healing, watch Jake. He's the reason they can keep this fight going. Bear's full health, he's got damage.
Oh my god, these guys
What a
will
pull!
not stop. Massive pull, big knockup from awesome Jake. Aurora whittled on away. The
What a
Roots there on
root.
the other side. Double kill from Barracuda. John Salter, my man's going big. And the Tartarus Titans only have 2 alive.
Layers is just trying to stay alive at this point. That is a tall order with the bolts looking for you. Bat out of hell can only get you so far.
Of course,
And no
this
one's
is huge.
low.
This is huge. The death timer's massively long here. Layers, the best you can do is buy some time. Give your teammates a chance to respawn a little bit quicker into this game. The Olympus Bolts have 4 members, all with FG. Benji might try to split this one out, but the Olympus Bolts eyeing the base.
I mean, this is a great play for them. Admittedly, running down right, you're going to have to go through the tier 2. It's going to buy some time, but 30 seconds without Paul, 30 without Aurora. You've got still a minute before Layers is back. Yeah, Benji and Cyclone are going to be able to put up a little bit of a defense here. It's definitely going to be difficult for you, but it's a 4-on-2 no matter what, and they've been handling Cyclone Spin just fine.
Cyclone Spin nearly killed Barracuda, a game of inches on that last tower dive. What you can't do here if you're Benji or Cyclone Spin is die. Oh, it's a huge taunt from Lasbury. He's been quiet so far this game, but that taunt might just end things. Benji rooted in place, and the Bolts have no eyes for the Titan room. They will take the right side. Phoenix and pack up and head out.
Yeah, with Paul back, Aurora back, it's just too much of a risk to try and jump in there, but you've got 2 minutes to work with. You can reset. Haddix has his ult, and that is going to open up a lot of opportunities here for the Cthulhu to be able to start some fights. Plus, look at what's on the map. All of your buffs on your side are available. You just stole away a speed buff. Let's throw that one out
And
there.
they're enhanced.
So Layers isn't going to have that. Yeah, you've got all of the enhanced buffs waiting for you on your side of the map. Plus all that gold that you just earned. This is going to be elixirs of defense, power, potions of power. I mean, they are coming back with a hefty punch on the side of it. Plus, we have to highlight it. We mentioned it when it was bought. Now it's worth mentioning that it's got 3 stacks. The Rage for Bera is definitely starting to feel a little bit better. Mantle of Discord picked up as well for both Lasbra and for Veneno. It's keeping them alive, Dave. And honestly, right now, that is the name of the game, is just staying through these fights. They've been 3 for 4, 4 for 3. Weird trades. The Bolts are finally getting to drive things the way they want to.
I think Barracuda's feeling himself here, Gora. 8-1-0 on the Chernobog. And early in the game, we wondered if it was the rotations into the fights that would make the difference. Since then, while that has been important, Cyclone's been eyeing a solo Phoenix here. We'll go for the Phoenix in the mid lane. The Olympus Bolts might press down on the gas just a little bit quicker here. Cyclone Spin will easily get this Phoenix. He'll take some damage, but the Olympus Bolts have a chance now to fight in a lopsided 4v5 on the left side of the map. Phoenix melts down Aurora with the ultimate. Pulls one back. Oh, Lasbro's gone back to base. Cyclone Spin will complete his back.
No.
So now it's a 5v4 over here on the left side of the map. The Olympus Bolts get the Phoenix, but they're being chased down by the Titans.
They've got 2 burned down, but Benji, this is a great opportunity, but he's taking so much damage. Layers can't get in here. Nobody can get in here.
Haddix times out of his ultimate. Ooh, take a deep breath, Goremizer. We will have a moment after the mid lane Phoenix gets taken. Worth mentioning, easy to forget because it happened 6 scraps ago. The right side Phoenix still down against the Tartarus Titans. Olympus Bolts setting a trap here. Benji and Aurora. You will get melted down quickly, regardless of who gets pulled in here. It seems like both teams enveloping one another. Might collapse here in a wide rotation in from Cyclone Spin and Layers.
So these 2 are really squishy, but you have to watch. So there's twofold. Anytime Cyclone Spin is elsewhere on the map, his ult, despite the fact that it has been, like nerfed in terms of the game, still pretty damn adept at split pushing, as we just saw from the Phoenix. I mean, he was able to take that no minion wave, just his ult to his name, and that is something that you have to be worried about here. It's also this really rare instance where things are lopsided. So Fire Giant's going to be respawning soon, but you've got 2 fire minions going one way on the side lanes and then the other way in the mid lane. And it's not that big a gold lead either. Realistically, these teams are about as even as you can get. It's just coming down to the fact that Bera at 8-1-10 and Vin at 6-2-10 have been able to get a lot done and not fallen a lot in the process. But you also have to be worried. I thought it was going to be a death sentence when Lasbra backed off on that left-hand Phoenix.
Agreed. I thought it was a 5v4 headed right back the other way. The Olympus Bolts weathered that storm. Also, Gore looks very different if Lasbra's able to stop that back from Cyclone Spin. That's where the Bolts still have their advantage. But one back and then a non-canceled back. I mean, suddenly it's like a 2-man swing on either side of things. Enhanced Fire Giant sprouts forth from the earth. Cyclone Spin and Layers alone on the left side of the map. Lasbro's kind of playing separator here, so it's a 4 versus 3, a rare 4v3 around the enhanced fire giant, which is brought low here. A roar walking in towards the Olympus bolts. Titans under attack here by the fire minions. 2 members of the Tartarus
They're going
Titans
for the win.
going into the base of the Olympus bolts. They are eyeing
Look
the
at
end.
Lasbro.
Can you
Look at
stop
Barra.
the backs? If you're the Tartarus Titans, Lasbro is here. Cyclone spin and Layers. They get their bluff called. Layers jumps on out over the wall. Lasbro taking a lot of damage here. Oh, big brute on the other side of this fight from Awesome Jake. Haddix goes big. 4 versus 4 on the right. Layers and Lasbro doing it out, and Lasbro strikes Pater on the left side of the map. Big swing here in this game.
Most important kill for the Bolts just happened. Lasbro got the kill that matters for them. Makes it a 4v5. Barra backs alongside his jungler and uses his ult to get back in here. They save the Titan. They stop a really smart call from the Titans, and now they put themselves in position at least to get another Fire Giant in their favor. This is going to be
Benji's
another
in between.
EFG, and Benji's here.
Benji is in between the 4 members of
Look
the
at a
Olympus
roar.
bolts. Enhanced fire giant burning away quickly. Pull in onto a roar.
Oh my
Burst
God, the
damage from
damage.
Fenenu. That's on out. Bye-bye Aurora, says Barracuda's got his 9th kill of the game. Awesome Jake low, but he will walk right into the forefront of this fight.
He's
Fenenu
alive?
saves his support's life. Benji jumps up and over, finally gets the kill onto Awesome Jake, but the Olympus bolts will gladly take this trade. Todd through from Lasbro. This game, sunsetting. Lasbro on a killing spree. The Olympus bolts will put down the Titans.
They've got Layers back. Look, this is rare. He's got enough damage. They're low on this side. Oh, they've got
game
Fire
over.
Minions.
It's game over. The
Never
Olympus
mind.
Bolts might have won this one anyway, but the fight goes in their favor, and this is a 2-0 for the Olympus Bolts.
That's number 8 for the Minions, Dave. That is, this year we have seen 8 of those that have happened. That's how stellar that fight is going, by the way. So much is going on, so much weighs on that I forgot Left Lane had anything going
If your
on
eyes
for
were
it.
anywhere else from that fight, I don't know, we were doing something wrong. My God,
Wow.
this is nuts. Look, I feel like, Gore, the Olympus Bolts, one of the harder teams to read here in this league. I mean, you show up and you punch the Titans in the mouth, a team who had a virtual lock on one of those top 2 seeds. They lose this one. Whoever's calculating all of the standings and the way things can go, have fun after this one. Still an open spot in the top 2. The Olympus Bolts with a fun one, 2-0 win over the Tartarus Titans. Gore and I will take a break, and then the desk will round us out.
Hey there, SMITE fans, Aggro here. Look, every single year, the SPL just keeps getting better. Season 7 was incredible, and in Season 8, I'm sure our players are going to take their game to the next level. But in order to do that, they're going to need the best gear they can get their hands on. And that's why I'm so excited to announce that the title sponsor for Season 8 of the SPL is Alienware. Yeah, that Alienware. Our players are getting the best of the best in computer gaming. These Alienware Aurora Ryzen Edition PC setups are insane. Not only will these be the PCs that the players will compete on once we are in studio, but Alienware is also providing one for each player at their home setup to make sure their practice is as good as possible. Now let's get down to brass tacks. The specs on these Alienware Aurora Ryzen Edition desktops are amazing. An AMD Ryzen 9 16-core processor.
That's a lot of cores.
That's plenty of processing power.
Plenty of cores.
If you want to stream, this is the way to go.
I know a lot about my cores, so. I mean, Pilates, right?
64 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM.
What? Is that true?
That is true. I mean, this thing has 64 gigs of DDR4 RAM.
Which you can do literally anything with.
Literally anything.
I've never had more than 16 gigs.
That's quadruple the amount I have at home.
And one of the hottest commodities in the PC world, an NVIDIA GeForce 3090 graphics card.
Insane how much better this is than what I have.
The best graphics you really need, Ultra, of course.
Content's gonna look good.
What's the point of all the power if you can't see it? Players will also be using the Alienware 25-inch 240 Hz monitors.
Man, when I load into scrims with this bad boy, I'm gonna feed so hard. And it's gonna be in perfect picture quality.
We are so excited to be partnering with Alienware for Season 8 of the SMITE Pro League. And the best part is, this VIP treatment, it's not just for the pros. You too can get the best possible SMITE experience. Just go to smitegame.com/Alienware and use code SMITEAW to get special discounts on some of Alienware's best products. Thanks again to Alienware. Make sure you're following them on Twitter and Instagram. That's @Alienware on both platforms. And you can join their community at alienwarearena.com.
Welcome back, everybody. The Olympus Bolts end up winning the set 2-0. It looked a little bit spooky there, a little bit for them. The Titans were off to a great start, but the Bolts ultimately pull it out and win the set 2-0. Before we get into breaking it down a little bit more, of course, have to remind you guys that we have to thank our title sponsor for Season 8 of the SMITE Pro League and Alienware. Make sure you're heading on over to smitegame.com/Alienware and using code SMITEAW to check out all of their best deals. Trust me, these things are absolute beasts. You want to get your hands on them. Again, smitegame.com/Alienware is the place to go for that. Bringing Mifflin back into it. Miff, I mean, the Bolts just continue to out-team fight teams. I mean, even when it looks like they're behind and they're going to start to lose, they just always seem to find a way.
I think in a game that long, I think you're right to start off the analysis by going straight into the team fight. I mean, that was like a 40-minute banger right there. And in every single team fight, what was the common thread? Frontline diff. Be it awesome Jake just wrangling people with the pulls and then resetting, finding multi-man ultimates, or
come over here.
Maybe you get Haddix just setting up with some of these huge just setting to madnesses. This one right here. Layers cannot be happy with how that one goes down. I mean, Jake actually just finesses them, and you'll see in every single one of these team fights, Jake kind of stay finessing them, bro.
Yeah, Jake was yanking them, for sure, on the Sylvanas, just pulling them into the team. Really, really difficult to deal with that. And then Haddix on this Cthulhu only died once, I believe, was equally hard to deal with. Cyclone was able to make a bigger impact on the Bakasura this game, but Bera certainly was bringing a little bit more to the table when it came to the team fights. As expected, he's a late-game hunter in comparison to Bakasura.
Yeah, I don't know why Cyclone Spin is so against just playing a god that is essentially Bakasura, but with ranged autos. I mean, that's like literally every hunter. But instead, keeps in line with his assassin plays down, gets punched for it this time around. But again, you gotta highlight the frontline presence. 16 assists from Haddix, Jake affecting 19 kills, 18 assists from the Sylvanas as well. And that's why you've got guys like Ven and Barracuda able to execute at this level. In every single team fight, they were given an unreasonable amount of space.
Only 3 deaths between the two backliners here for the Bolts. 48,000 damage for Venenu, though Benji did outdo him, 49K for Benji on the Nike. Just a big damage game in general. Barracuda's 37, nearly 38,000 player damage in comparison to Cyclone's 21. Certainly a big difference. Felt like Lazara was having trouble getting involved at times, and Layers was able to do a lot. But then the same could be said on the opposite end, where Barra was able to do a lot, but Cyclone really couldn't, and it was just a matter of which of those was going to be able to end up pulling out the victory. And of course, it is the Olympus Bolts and Barracuda. But as Mifflin was saying, it wasn't just the back line. The front line making an absolute huge difference for this team. And for what it's worth, Lazara did win that ever so important 1v1 as that backdoor attempt was starting to come through. So a little bit cheeky there, I'd say, from the Tartarus Titans. Well, we've got the frontliner here standing by for an interview in just a moment. Awesome Jake standing here with Dave, but they're ready right now. Let's do it right now. Take it away there, Dave.
That's right. Bring it on over. Awesome Jake standing by with me. Surprisingly tall, by the way. Awesome Jake. I think that would surprise a lot of people. I'll pick up right where Aggro left off there. Barracuda has a big game. He goes like 9-1, 10-1, something like that. Is it all thanks to you on this Sylvanas at the end of the day? Was the Sylvanas the real difference maker for the Bolts in game 2?
I mean, every kill, it was basically me just throwing my lasso and then reeling them in.
That's right. Reel them in, locked down, taken down, and without you.
Lazgo did get 2 solo kills, or a solo kill both game those.
That's right. So you'll give a little love to Laz.
Yeah. And then Ben was like one-shotting people, and Hax was like, front-lining, being a big squid.
Got it. So we're walking ourselves back. The rest of the guys also had their impact. That's right. The rest of the Bolts run down the Titans in this one, it feels like. Look, your top 2, all those sorts of fun things, all implicated in a set like this. You get a 2-0 win to end the phase up against one of the top teams in the league. Do you feel like you guys are playing some of your best Smite right now?
Yeah, we're just ramping up for Worlds. Just getting big and huge.
That's right.
In game and out of it.
That's right. Teams who work out together win together, right? I think that's how it goes.
Yeah, it's me and the Bolts in the gym.
Every single day. Yep. And he's not kidding. I walk in there and it's back and buys, chest and tries, legs, you name it. The Bolts are doing it. And you get a win here over the Titans. Jake, thanks for taking the time. Congrats on your win, and we'll see you in the group stages.
Yeah.
See them in the gym too all the time, right?
Dude,
we are also there.
What did he say? Back and buys and
chest
tries and thighs, dude.
No,
I'm out
chest
there
and tries.
working them. Dude.
Yeah, we see them all the time. Mifflin and I just lifting weights, and then here come the Bolts again.
God, and they keep asking me to use the machine that I'm
on.
Like,
I know,
bro. Let me do my thing.
Unbelievable, but they are there, as are we. To be clear, constantly at the gym. Let's take a look at what we got coming for you the rest of this weekend. I believe we got the schedule coming up first, as it was a fun day here. The Camelot Kings 2-0 the Valhalla Valkyries, and then the Bolts with that clutch 2-0 up against Tartarus Titans, throwing their hat in the ring for a top 2 seed going into the group stages. Tomorrow, we've got the Jade Dragons kicking it off up against the Oni Warriors, and then a pretty big Atlantis Leviathan Solar Scarabs game, because now Leviathans have a little bit of pressure, as I believe the Bolts have the head-to-head there.
I think so. And
I don't know.
The Solar Scarabs, well, they have been playing spoilers to some other teams in the past and can certainly continue to do so here. So make sure you're tuning in tomorrow and catching every single bit of SBL action.
And let's take a look at those standings so you can get a nice little visual representation of what we're thinking about. Yeah, Lord Dewey, because 3 teams at 5-2. I need Gormizer here to do some math for me on what these tiebreakers. We talked about tiebreaker scenarios this morning, and I already forget about it. I just can't remember. All I know is Leviathans win. They're the first seed, so they control their own destiny.
Yeah, easy peasy for the Leviathans as long as they make it easy for themselves by finding a win up against the Solar Scarabs, which, again, is not guaranteed.
No, not guaranteed whatsoever. And then the Jade Dragons going up against the Oni Warriors. Panda Cat and PBM in danger of having their first losing phase in the last 3-4 years, something like that. They've had a winning record every other phase besides that. So even though it doesn't really affect them in the standings whatsoever, those 2 teams are locked. We'll see what happens. I don't know. We might get a troll set there. It's always in danger whenever seedings aren't important, but I think that team might kind of want it.
Yeah, Jade Dragon's certainly a squad that have been improving very recently as well. I mean, every time we get an opportunity to speak with the players, the coach, they say, look, man, wins or loss doesn't super matter. We're getting better every single week. They are very clearly a team that have their eyes set on the ultimate prize, Worlds.
Should be a fun day tomorrow, so make sure you're tuning in right there at 1 p.m. Eastern right here on twitch.tv/SmiteGame. Until then, from all the casters, production, everyone working, we'll see you tomorrow. But for tonight, we got to peach it.